All right, good evening. This is our duly noticed meeting of the Community Preservation Committee for Wednesday, February 9th, 2022, beginning at 7 p.m. I am Peter Pingator. I'm the chair of the CPC. We are conducting this meeting remotely by Zoom. First, we'll do a tech check. I'll begin by confirming that all committee members and staff members and other persons who we anticipate speaking tonight and are noted on the agenda can hear me and we can hear them. So let's do a roll call and going alphabetically. Joe Barnes.
Here.
Artie Cracker.
Here.
Bob Dermody.
Here.
Laura Dorfman.
Here.
Reg Foster.
Here.
Chris Gerstle.
Here.
Jean McKnight.
Here.
Rick Zimbone.
Here.
And the chair, I'm Peter Pingator. I'm here. I just need to note that Chris Gerstle has appeared to, he's now out of the basement. He's somewhere where there's a window. So congratulations on that, Chris.
Thank you. It's those small little baby steps in life, and I appreciate you pointing that out.
I think we got to recognize that. Okay.
You're moving on up.
Moving on up, man. You're out of the basement. That's great. Okay.
Great
And
reference.
Peter, you appear to be in a different location too.
I am sitting in my wife's home office, which is you'll see. It kind of looks like my wife's home office. I'll say no more. Okay. Okay. So, all right. So staff, let me call your name. Cecilia Simchuk.
Here.
And Kristen Wright.
Here.
All right. And now do we have, I just want to make sure that whoever's presenting on behalf of Park and Rec and Needham Community Farms can hear us. I don't know if, and we can hear them. I don't know if we need to go through that now, but that's.
It does look like Joe just raised his hand. I'm assuming to indicate that he can hear you. Karis and Stacy are both in the audience as well and will text me if they have any issues hearing. And then Tom Ryder, I will be texting. He's pulling double duty in 2 meetings right now. So I will be texting him when the community farm is wrapping up so he can join us. Okay,
great. All right. So I previously noted that this is a meeting of the Community Preservation Committee. We are conducting it remotely on Zoom, and it is being done consistent with Governor Baker's emergency order of March 2020 as extended by legislative action to April 1, 2022. And allowing public meetings that must comply with the requirements of the open meeting law to be conducted remotely. The public is welcome to follow along and can access this meeting through the Zoom app with the address duly noted on our agenda that was posted with the clerk's office. Please note that the meeting is being recorded and most people are participating by video. So people can see you and see things in your background, and be careful not to screen share, but please note that whatever you do put on the screen will be broadcast and captured by video. Meeting materials have been provided to you and are either posted or will otherwise note as best we can materials that are being distributed this evening. The ground rules are what we usually have are the usual ones. I'll introduce each speaker. Speaker will make a presentation, and then we will go in alphabetical order, and I'll ask each one of you to make ask any questions, make any comments, any motions. We'll go through that, and then from there we do a quick fire round where everybody, first one with their hands up, gets to go next on the next round. Whenever you speak, please note your name, or I will note your name for the record. We need clarity on the transcription. Each vote this evening, I don't know if we'll be taking votes, but each vote this evening will be done by roll call vote. So now turning to our agenda, chairman's updates. I don't think that I have any updates from our prior meeting. And the next agenda item is CPA updates. I think the only update there is that we're waiting for responses from the stakeholder committees and commissions to provide us with proposed revisions to the particular sections of the CPA plan that apply to those committees and commissions. And we previously distributed a red line version that Rick and I took a run at editing, and that's kind of on your deck for things to do. But I have to acknowledge that, you know, the next few weeks are kind of our busiest season, right? So if we let that slide for a few weeks and not deal with it until April, I don't think that there's any harm in that. But just bear in mind that you do have a little bit of homework, which is to read the CPA plan at some point after we get through this busy season and offer any edits that you have to it. Tonight, we have applicant presentations. The first one is the community presentation by the Needham Community Farms, and that's FY 2023-11. And then our second one is going to be the boat launch project by Park and Rec FY 2023-09. So let's start with the presentation by the proponents of FY 2023-11, the Needham Community Farms.
All right, I will bring Joe in.
There's Joe.
And turn on this. Good to see you all. Are Rick and Artie sitting next to each other on the beach?
Yeah, we are, Joe. I like Darty's background much better than mine.
Oh man, you stole my exact same background.
Anyway, it's been a long time doing this.
Hold on, here, Rick, hold on, Rick. Here, let me pass you a drink. Hold on. There you go.
Oh, boy.
Okay, and I think I know a good number of you personally. So to those that I don't, I'm Joe Leghorn. I've lived in Needham for about 40 years, and I've been involved with the community farm for about 10 or 11, and on the board for the last 6 or 7, I can't remember. I do have a couple of presentations. I know I answered your questions and probably sent you more documents than you wanted, which caused Cecilia to have problems sending them out. I tried to keep them under 10 gigabytes of attachments, but I might not have been successful entirely in doing that. So I've become really good at screen share, teaching my Needham community education course on sustainable gardening. So if I can screen share.
You should be able to now.
Okay, I'm gonna use part of this presentation that we used a couple of years ago when we came for the bed improvement, growing area expansion in the part of the farm that where we grow produce, vegetables, and some berry fruits for distribution through the mobile markets at public housing and through the Needham Community Council Food Pantry. So this goes back, we're looking at 2020, which was 2019, and we were all together in person. The mission of the farm is to try to address food insecurity in Needham, to encourage environmental stewardship, and to build community through volunteerism. And we've been doing that. There's a picture of our mobile markets, which show up at Seabeds, Captain Cook, and of course, Linden Chambers once a week, or maybe once every 2 weeks. It depends, because we do 2 a week. We got 3 places to cover, so it varies a little bit. Here are some volunteers. We are so grateful for all of the young people on their community service hours who get there. We also are seemingly for male middle school students, the community service of last resort. When they have 2 days left to get their hours in, they call us and can I come out there and put in my 8 hours or whatever it is. We welcome them. I know I did that when I was a kid too, wait till the last minute. Here are some of our gardening classes for all ages. We run gardening programs for families with younger children, for various camps that come out during the summer, and for residents who take intermediate and beginning gardening classes where they're provided with seeds and plants and instruction. And we've been doing that. And some of these students have taken the intermediate course 10 times simply because they want access to a bed to grow vegetables in the summer. And the classes, they're given a lot, and classes are around $375, $400 for a full bed, 4 by 12 bed. So, but people love it, and certainly among them, they've formed their own little community of helping each other out. We also preach environmental sustainability, and we also walk the walk. No any fertilizers, amendments, pesticides that are used on the farm have to be organically certified either by a local organic certifier or by OMRI, which is a national program. Here's, attracting lots of good predator insects, predator amphibians to try to keep some of the pests under control. We also have a beekeeper, which is really important to help us pollinate some of our crops, especially the squash. Here's the mobile market again. The people who get our food love the high quality of it. It's lovingly grown and delivered in a spirit of true fellowship. So this is last term's project. So let me switch my screen share to something that is more, okay. This is a shorter program. I have been spending a lot of time preparing materials for my NCE course. So this one took second place. Here again is that same picture of the garden. The plan is to, in an area adjacent to where we're growing these food for distribution, to build 150 raised beds available for a more modest yearly rental to grow their own vegetables and flowers. As I said in the answers to the question, certainly we would probably provide folks with a certain level of instruction available to them, both written material, in-person advice, video access to our presentations. We also always seem to have an abundance of leftover seed that is donated, and certainly that would be made available to those folks. Part of it is that what you see on the right is the area that comprises the usable part of the plateau that was built over the Nike site. In the lower left here, that is where the existing growing space is here too. This triangle basically is what the select board licenses to us, including this area. It's about 3.2 acres. The plan is to, in this section, build the 150 raised beds. So this plateau that I talk about is basically is or supposedly clean fill that was deposited there after or during the high school renovation in the late 90s, early 2000s, and packed down by running heavy equipment over it. So it is really difficult to grow there. It does not drain at all. We've spent quite a bit of effort, including the last project, to try to get areas that will at least drain a bit in the springtime. And last July, for instance, if you were walking on the walkways or in the field, you probably sunk into mud, or you were walking through standing water that was 3 or 4 inches deep. So this land is not really ideal for growing anything. So the plan to build the beds, and part of the plan too, is to make a path from the parking area to the beds that would be accessible to people who face physical challenges, wheelchairs. We're planning where you will be able to push a wheelchair on that. People in walkers, people who are unsteady on their feet. And we also want to make sure that the area within the community garden area is also safe to walk on, drains well, doesn't get muddy, and is safe. We want people to be safe, to be able to enjoy the outdoors, and to have some fun growing. As far as this is sort of like what you'd see a grid of 150 beds, probably in all. This area would probably be where the taller beds for people who are physically challenged would be, so they don't have to bend, be closest to the entrances, and going further back would be the rest of the beds. And that is part of our plan. The only thing is, after I did this, I said to myself, maybe I should have reversed it, because this way the beds are going north-south and they would be better going east-west. We've got lots of space to make those adjustments. In fact, the area would be the same. We just turn it on the plot differently and put the shed and other things in different spaces. But it works out because we've got plenty of area to do that. We've worked with a number of reputable contractors in the area to get estimates, which were part of what I provided to you. All of them are local companies, some of them Dedham, certainly all Boston, and that's where we're going. Here's what I just talked about in words. We are going to build a fence for 2 reasons. One, to prevent deer from foraging on what everyone is growing, which would probably upset them. And 2, to prevent any vandalism of the beds by people who aren't growing there. There'll be an 8-foot fence, deer fence, which we are allowed to have according to our license from the select board. Next, here are what the beds look like. These are the regular beds. They're taller than what most people have in their backyard. They're almost 2 feet tall, which for everybody makes bending a little easier. They will have 4 feet all around them to allow people to work easily and not get in each other's way. It will be filled with high quality soil from Black Earth Compost, who will be building the beds. As I think, and I answered the questions, they are giving us a really good price for these beds compared to what somebody who's having them build 3 beds in the backyard would be. We're probably at 60% of that cost. The soil would be all organic. It's really good. It drains. And although it's supposed to last 20 years, after this, into the second year, we will start to provide the growers, the gardeners with, plan is to provide them with at least 1 inch of high quality compost to make sure the soil remains fertile. If people want to add their own organic fertilizer, that'll be up to them. I did speak to some people who have gardened at the Wellesley community gardens, and they complain that the town just ignores it. The quality of the soil has degraded over the years, and there were a lot of other issues. And we hope to maintain this as a place where people will want to gather, enjoy each other, enjoy the outdoors, and enjoy growing. We're also going to have a small shed, probably, this may be about the size, the door will be about that big, where we will have communal tools available to the gardeners so they don't have to bring their tools out there. Also, there'll be shelving such that, and hopefully we will be able to get small boxes for them everyone to have an area where they can store whatever they want to leave there, seeds, their own tools, anything with that there. And that will be available to everyone there. And for the gardeners, I mean, we haven't gone through everything. Certainly there would be a preference for Needham residents. The yearly charge for Needham residents would be less than for non-residents. 15 beds would be about 4 feet tall. They'd be licensed on a yearly basis with preference given to returning gardeners. We plan to extend the water source that's available to the community farm, to this area, and have 6 or 8 risers with hoses provided so people will be able to water their gardens. And as I mentioned, providing them with high quality compost over the years. I know my answers to questions were long, and I don't want to take the time to go through that unless you have particular questions that remain after you read that. But there's one thing that I do want to mention, and the more I thought about it, is that one of the problems, excuse me, now I'm going to grab the drink, is, pure water, is that in today's world, the idea of community has become something that seems elusive. And one of the references that I cited there was the Herder Community Gardens. I think it was Brighton. And when you read about community gardens, people who do it tend to do it year after year. And they become friends with the guy in the next bed, and who becomes friends with the guy in 2 beds down. And it does help to build community. And I think that a lot of activities today, whether we're staring at these screens or we're not even together at a meeting like this, people start to disassociate with human contact. And I think when you talk about community preservation, I'm looking at it, yeah, we can preserve sites, we can preserve things, but we really need to work at doing things that preserve the fabric of the community. I mean, when you're gardening, you're talking about the recent past, what variety you're growing. You're not talking about somebody's politics. That may come years later, but you're already friends. And there is, something where there's a human connection on the basis of something as fundamental as growing food to eat. And oftentimes people will say, look, I think this variety of beans are the tastiest. Once try one. And it just tends to build community. So I'm happy to take questions. Let's go for the lightning round.
All right, well, actually, thanks, Joe. This is my job at this point. So what we'll do is we'll go in, can we stop the screen?
I'm going to stop that.
Let's
it's
get
gone.
the whole, all right, now we have everybody here. And Kristen has her hand up. Do you have this? No? Okay, so let's go in what we usually do. Let's go in alphabetical order and I'll call on each member and you can raise questions and you can pass if you don't have any questions. But let's start with Joe Barnes. Joe?
Unmute. Joe, you're muted.
Okay, I'm back. Joe, the 150 new beds that you're proposing here, are there a certain number that you have designated for the food pantry types of activities and the rest for
Well,
gardeners?
We're going to generally in our gardening classes, we've allotted about 10% of those for total scholarships for folks who come from public housing or SNAP eligible. I presume that we would probably be looking at 15 beds that would be basically given to folks that are SNAP eligible.
Okay. I must say the growing your own food and the importance of food in everyone's lives, as well as providing opportunities for people to do the growing. So I think it's a nice mix of education and getting people out and together in the community, as you mentioned. So that is all I have. I think I'll come back to one later on if I don't mind. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
That's fine. Thank you.
You're muted.
Sorry, guys. Okay. Artie, you have questions, comments?
Comments, minor question. I mean, clearly this is a wonderful thing for the community. Joe, you put an awful lot of time into your presentation, your thoughts about it. Even just remotely getting to the stage is an awful lot of work. I think we all can appreciate that. Just wanted to check on something. My apologies, you probably already presented this. What is the projection of income coming in for this versus cost after you get the money and you put them in? What's the projection of income coming in and cost to maintain?
Well, that's always difficult to ascertain.
Sure.
I think I gave you, if you were renting and licensing all 150 beds at an average value of $100, that's $15,000 a year. If it's, you're going to cut out 10% for scholarship, and if the rate is 75%, it's 11,000 and change. Certainly staff time is going to have to be devoted to supervising, maintaining, dealing with issues, giving instructions, a certain amount of time will probably, certain amount of expense, and I was working out some of it, providing compost each year will be in the area of, $1,000 to $2,000 a year for quality compost. In spite of the efforts at the transfer station. I know Karis is Karis listening? It's just not the same quality because we've used that for years, and while it's clean, it just doesn't pack the same level of nutrients that you really need to maintain a garden bed that is growing. Some things that people love to grow, or as we describe it, growing as heavy feeders. People who like to grow the brassicas, the kales, the broccolis, they just use so much of the nutrients that you really have to maintain the soil well. So it may be a break even. We're also thinking we've got to, during the first, hopefully 10 years, maintenance costs with regard to repair will be minimal, but at some point you want to have a little pile of money there that you can reach into to maintain the garden bed. So I mean that's some of the thinking that we're looking at with regard to that.
Well, thanks, Joe. I mean, I think I know of myself, and I believe a lot of us understand the value of this. That's the value to the community for what's going on here, and also the value of, I guess they say, the education of Earth, of what the Earth is about. And so thanks, Joe. That's all I got.
All right, thank you, Artie. And Bob Dermody.
Good evening, Joe. Bob Dermody. Thank you for the very thorough documentation provided. That's really helpful. And so sorry, I lead with that, and then an apology if I missed something, but on the site, and I was trying to find it again in the town document, your agreement with the town. Could you come back in a few years and ask for 150 more beds? Is there anything preventing that by the town or the site?
Nope. No. I mean, I think one of the things.
Is there space for it?
Oh, absolutely.
Okay. All right.
If you look at what I've done, I've talked about an acre, and I've asked estimates on an acre because I wanted to get sort of projecting out and not knowing what's going on with inflation, especially with lumber and other stuff. To do an acre, we're going to be taking about 3/4 of an acre. There's certainly room to do another 150 beds.
I just picked that number, just trying to get an idea of scale. All right. And then are there any restrictions on what people can grow? Specifically, would people be allowed or prevented from growing marijuana?
That's something we haven't considered. That's a tough one because when you look at the marijuana rules, the gate will be locked. They could. We could impose, a restriction on that. That's an easy one to do.
I just asked more out of curiosity if it's ever come up in discussion with the town.
No. And the other one too, we're not doing that. The other one too is that, when I think about that, I'm glad you brought that up because I had not thought of that as an issue, because that's something that, somebody would want to poach or climb the fence to get. So
Possibly.
There may be a good reason to do it, because one of the things in the marijuana law is it can't be visible from a public way. No. And that's true. That would be true out at that site. However, there are a lot of people that use the dog park, and I think.
And I'm not advocating one way or the other. It was just a curiosity question.
I'm just thinking about problems.
Yeah, well, that's kind of what we do here too. Thank you, Joe.
Thank you.
Nothing further at this time, Mr. Chair.
Thank you, Bob. Okay, Laura Dorfman, questions?
Thank you. Thank you, Joe. It's so great to have this available, and I wanted to note that in your first PowerPoint presentation, there was a volunteer from my bank, Dedham Savings. I think I was there that day too. It was a great experience. So thank you for that. I'm just referencing the last request, which was in it was 2020. It was number 03, 2020, way back when. Yeah.
Yep, yep.
And I believe it was approved. It's listed as an approved project. I was on CPC when that was there. And I'm just wondering if there's an update to that request. So that request involved increasing the square footage available for growing on the current site. It was like, and you said it would be as a pilot project to determine whether the beds can be built and maintained in a wooden enclosure, whether covered drainage ditch system can effectively control, remove excess water from the growing area. And you expected that project to be done by 2021. So I'm just wondering the status of all of that and how that went. And I apologize if you've already addressed that.
That's fine. That is a qualified success. The drainage worked.
Okay.
The way we increased the growing area was by reducing the width of the growing beds, but also reducing the width of the space between beds to what you see in traditional farms, going from 4 feet to 2 feet.
Mhm.
The drainage worked. The problem is that with volunteers, the 2 foot wide area where you're supposed to walk may be a little narrow, making it difficult for volunteers. So yeah, it was a pilot project. We learn. I mean, we may have to go back if we do that. The drainage work, we just may have to go back to 4 foot beds with maybe 3 feet in between, which is why I'm proposing. Oh, I love your cat.
Oh, sorry. That's Buddy.
We may have to go. Why in the proposed one we're doing 4 feet around each bed to allow more room to work and not bump into each other. So
is it fair to say that the pilot program gave you some information and feedback that you could use in this next request?
Right, and it probably will give, and let's give us information to use looking at the area that's currently under cultivation for growing food to supply. So it's the one thing is I teach this the Dedham community education and gardening class is the one thing about gardening and growing and farming, you make mistakes constantly. The trick is to learn from them. And as a complete aside, the Dedham Community Farm is so grateful for the year after year support from the Dedham Savings Bank. So thank you.
Thank you. Hope to see you this year.
Right. Well, yeah, I want to see people in person. Yeah.
I know, right? Thank you very much.
Okay, thank you, Laura. Reg Foster.
Hi, good evening. Hi, Joe.
Hi,
I thought that was a very great presentation. And of course, we all know you for years. And so I really have really no questions that haven't already been answered with respect to the merits and the use you're going to put to the funding. I did notice in the packet, which unfortunately I only received earlier today, so I didn't give it its just due. So I may have missed something in it. But in looking through it, you provided the financials, the balance sheets for the organization. And I guess that's the purpose of that, is to demonstrate that you're a going concern and financially solvent. Is that right?
That's right. I mean, that we slowly are building up what I look at is a fund that can make the Dedham Community Farm not only grow sustainably, but be financially sustainable. And that, it's important. For instance, we thought that we were going to have a terrible year financially the first year of the pandemic. Turns out that everyone focused on food and donations just poured in. And we always like to try to do new things. And unfortunately, I don't know the details, but I know we're doing a number of projects this year involving the public housing, especially I think it's Seabeds and Captain Cook. We're running a couple programs out there for kids and youth. Hopefully that will get some of the young people excited. So yeah, we try to work with everyone, and part of this too is I've been even thinking with the community gardens is touching base with the Center in the Heights and other town agencies for folks who may be those who are getting there and for scholarship beds to have a way to get there, because I know that some of the scholarship students that we have now from public housing, somebody else gives them a ride out to the farm. So that's another thing that we're looking and thinking about, and how to partner with other agencies in town to build community.
Well, yes, certainly. I do know that a number of residents are interested in this sort of thing. So, but I was just wanted to get back to the financials that I was asking about. So you provided the 2019 year-end and 2020 year-end balance sheet, but not the 2021 year-end balance sheet. Maybe that was an oversight.
That should have been there. I'm happy to forward that.
No, you enough said. Maybe I missed it because it's in there. It's in there.
But we were in the black for 2021.
No, that's great. So maybe we could just request that you add to that the 2021, and then also I was wondering while you're at it, would it make sense to also do a sort of an income statement or a revenues and expenses statement as well, that you would be sort of something you probably keeping track of as well. So and I guess the third thing for a nonprofit organization would be a sources and uses of funds statement. When you have those three, then that triangulates completely the point you're trying to make, which is financially healthy organization and solvency and all of that sort of thing.
Yeah, I will ask the treasurer. I'm not the keeper of the books, but I know they're all there with regard to what we're spending.
I'm sure they are. You're the keeper of the flame, but not the books. I get it. Yes, right.
Yeah.
That's it. That's the only thing. I thought everything else was very thorough, very complete, and definitely understandable. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Reg.
So I think one of the things that we need to work on as a committee is we make these requests for additional information during the course of the presentations and actually during our later discussion. So I just want to put the responsibility on all of us, including the chair, to keep notes, but really for the individual committee members who are making requests for additional information, just jot that down and send an email to Cecilia. I'll have my notes, Cecilia will have her notes, but that way we'll be sure to get that request in writing to the proponent, okay? So I'm just using Reg as an example. He's made 3 requests for information, very thoughtful stuff. Reg, if I could burden you with the idea or the request that you put that in an email to Cecilia, it can be in barely legible form. She'll turn it into.
Consider it done.
Okay, she'll turn it into.
Be done in 5 minutes here. Go ahead.
Don't do it while you're in class here. Okay, that's not right. Okay, right. Good. Thanks, Reg. Okay.
After the meeting's done. Yeah.
All right. So, okay. So now, Chris Gersel.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Joe, great seeing you again in a great presentation. I have no questions at this time, and I'll just echo what a lot of my colleagues have said, that this is probably one of the ideal projects when you think of something that should go through the CPC. I know we're dealing with you last cycle with the first transformation of it. I learned something from it, and I think every single year that you said it, you're learning something new out of it. So I think it's a great cause, and I think this is a great example of giving back to the community. So I commend you and the staff doing everything that you guys do. And again, another great job and great seeing you.
All right, thanks. Good to see you too, Chris.
Okay, thanks, Chris. All right, Gene McKnight, questions for Joe Leghorn. Joe,
You're muted, Gene.
this
My
is
only,
this is the universal signal for I can't hear it. It's not, it's strange.
Exactly.
Sounds like, but now it's just can't hear you. Okay, go ahead.
my only connection with the Dedham Community Farm, and I'm trying to remember how many years ago it was, 10, 15 years, is that during the season of her work, the community farmer, a young woman who lived with us at our home at 210 May Street in a suite of rooms. And she was a delightful young woman. We didn't keep, I didn't keep the friendship going over the years. That's regrettable, but it was a nice connection. And my only concern is that your right to use the land is pursuant to a license. And in your materials, you refer to it as a year-to-year license. You said you asked the select board for a longer license and presented them with a draft longer term license. But even if the select board approved that longer term license, it's still merely a license. And I assume there'd be conditions when, and it's unlike a lease that simply goes for a certain period of years, no matter what. There would be conditions where the select board could give you notice and say the license is terminated. And so that leads me to my question. I was looking at your initial project eligibility, initial eligibility project application form. I don't see any mention of the select board as sort of applying with you or supporting this project. And I would want to see that, since the town owns the land and it's under the jurisdiction of the select board.
So we're now going to get into dirty politics. When I pushed the select board last spring and again in the summer, I was told that if I really pushed, I had the votes. And when we come to licenses, I negotiated a license with the town regarding its use of the Christ Church parking lot for library parking. And as part of that, the town insisted that there would be a number of years where the license couldn't be revoked. So I have experience with that. For those people on the, or I guess already on the Conservation Commission, there's one select board member who is fixated with building a road between where the manor house is in the Ridge Hill Reservation and the farm area.
I'm aware of that too, yeah.
And I was told that there would be, that this person would stand in the way unless I convinced the Conservation Commission to go along with it. I think that with the changes in the select board and the upcoming change in the select board, that negotiating a longer license with conditions, it won't be a problem. In fact, I think Cecilia and Kristen were involved in this a little bit. There was a question about who should be the applicant for this. Should it be the town, the select board, or the farm? And the word came down, I guess from Kate, but through Miles, that the applicant was appropriately the Dedham Community Farm. So I have a feeling that getting that extension would not be a real problem. The other thing which in the sort of background is that infamous report that the town spent $50,000 or $70,000 with regard to what could be done out at that site with regard to the wetlands and everything else. That's never been presented to the town. There is little that can be done out there that would not severely impact the wetlands. The wetlands, if you go back, if you look at my presentation or in the documents, the wetlands begin in the area where the dog park is surrounding and go all the way around about 180 degrees. And the 25-foot line is not that far from the top of the pyramid. So there are all kinds of conservation issues and conservation regulations. So yeah, I intend to push, and Jean, a push from this committee to say, try to nail that down, helps me with talking to my friends on the select board, many of whom who do support the farm and its mission. It's interesting too, because when you look at it, I included there back in 2000, whatever, the town was very proud to say that we've started a community farm, but it was really sort of a bunch of committed citizens that moved that along. So
a follow-up question then, if I want to see what it is you propose for a license that would have a longer term and would have some reasonable termination clause, I would look at the draft that was in the materials.
There was a proposal there that was outlined.
Okay, I haven't looked at it
what we
yet.
were looking for, but I've not sit down and started drafting a license.
Oh, so it's like a term sheet more than a license that's in our materials?
Yeah,
Okay.
and you have a copy of the license,
The current license.
current license.
Yeah. Well, I hope that as we move along, before the town meeting on this proposal, that there will be such a license in place to make sure that what we're spending our money on is supported by the select board and will be there, in a reasonable long period of time. Okay.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, so we can, we'll take that as kind of an expressed concern, perhaps by all the committee, but certainly by one committee member about the length of the license. And so that's good, Jean. I'm glad that you did bring that up. Just put a placeholder on this. I'll do this when it's my turn to speak, but related to the license is the question in my mind on site control. So I'll have a question about that too.
Peter, excuse me.
Pardon me?
Peter, excuse me. I just wanted to mention, I would find it, I personally would find it a little better if we just kind of keep personal issues out of play with what's been going on as far as different boards. I would prefer we don't go that way.
So you're not referring to anything that Jean said or that I said, correct?
No.
Okay. So that's a good point. And so so we try to do that, Joe. So just really, bear that in mind. I could have interrupted you, but and just instructed you at that point. But just okay. Artie, that was excellent point to make. Very good. Okay. Okay. All right. So now, we'll go on to Rick Zimbo.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Joe, thank you for the presentation of all the material. It was very interesting to read through that. I've got a few questions. To a degree, Reg and Jean both kind of got a little bit ahead of me, but I'm going to delve in a little bit deeper into both subject matters. The first one has to do with the financials. And I too think it's a very good idea, as Reg pointed out, to get sources and uses and income statements. But I was able to take a look at the balance sheets that were provided, and I noticed that the organization has somewhere north of $100,000 of cash in various accounts as reported on the balance sheet. And I'm wondering, that's been growing. I'm assuming it, since you said you were in the black this past year, it's grown even more. And so my question is what's the intended use of that? And was there any contemplation of using some of those funds to help with this particular project?
Well, I think one of the issues there is that part of it is that we're growing that to, and part of that is being put aside to completely fence the area at some point. The other one is to, and I think that the board views that we need to have, depending upon what might happen, a year's worth of operating fund, to cover a year's worth of operating funds. Because we don't have that much of it, we're talking about actual income as opposed to donations of about 15% of our annual budget. So it can be, if there's a really bad year with regard to donations, half of that could just disappear. The other one too is that in doing this, we're going to have a certain amount of uncertainty with how much it costs to operate this, to maintain it, to deal with keeping things going, problems that arise. Unfortunately, and you don't want to manage, sometimes there are issues with regard to, in the past it's been, people who are attending the class and you end up spending 30, 40, 50, 60 hours of staff time, dealing with these ancillary problems that have nothing to do with operating or growing. So there is a certain amount of uncertainty. Certainly, the farm is willing to undertake that, but it is sort of putting in the sweat equity, so to speak, as opposed to the hard cash equity.
Yeah, Joe, I appreciate that. My problem, and it is a little bit of a problem, is I tend to look at things more from a financial perspective and less from a, wow, it's really great we're doing this perspective. And I've got a little bit of a problem as I'm looking down the road at the future. If we spend $200,000 on this project to develop 150 beds, and we have those beds built, and we, let's say the first year, you're only able to license 20% of them, and maybe you don't get the rapid growth that you anticipate. And what are the staffing, as you just very rightly outlined, what are going to be the operating costs? What are going to be the maintenance costs? How much additional staffing are you going to need to basically make this a success? And it's almost like your mission is shifted a little bit from when you first put the slide up, because while it's good that we're having all these volunteer opportunities and people learn to garden and grow, transforming it from a couple beds to 150 raised beds, you've now become somewhat of a business. And I'm just concerned that we need to get a better handle on both the historical financials as well as the future financials, because I don't want to see us invest $200,000 and then, find out that for whatever reason, it wasn't a success. And I guess I'm not asking you to answer that now, and I'll put that question to you in accordance with the chairman's directive, and give you folks time to think about how you'd respond.
See,
I don't want to put you on the spot, but it's just a concern that I have, and I think it needs to be addressed before I can vote in favor of spending $200,000. That's number one. Number two is, gets back to Gene's question with respect to the license. If I read your material properly and I understood it, which is a big if, your current license is for 1 year, and I think the fee is $1. Is that correct?
that's correct.
Is there any discussion with the selectmen if you were to get a longer term license or lease or whatever you want to call it? Is it still contemplated that would be $1 per year? Number one. And number two is, given the fact that you'll be tying this up for an extended period of time, is there any bid requirement under the procurement laws that would require someone other than just the community farm to have access and the right to use this property under a bidding provision? And I don't know the answer to that. So I don't know if you do, or if we have to go back to the procurement group in the town.
So I actually think that there may be a bidding requirement. Having once been the chair of the board of a Montessori school over in Natick, I also know that from working with the town of Natick, that you can write an RFP such that there's only one, maybe two qualified bidders. That's one of those things. And if somebody were to bid otherwise, then it just falls apart. But, that's part of the issue. But, I fully recognize that the number of years is an issue, which is why I have been pushing with, the select board for a while, and I'm sure I can, get their attention.
Yeah, no, I think we need to support you in that effort, because before I can vote in favor of $200,000, I kind of, if I read Gene's comments correctly, if not us, but town meeting might have a problem with us spending $200,000 without a guarantee of, continued success in operation. Again, I don't know, but I'm going to throw these out and allow you time to respond. But I think it's important then, also that, both from your perspective and our perspective, we need to touch base with the select board on this through, Cecilia and the town manager, perhaps, Mr. Chair. And that's the second thing. The third thing is, I was curious, I was reading through the way that Wellesley does the license, I think you had put a Wellesley license in the packet. And there doesn't seem to be any restriction on what the ultimate use is of the product coming out of the garden. I mean, theoretically, could someone, for example, could I go in and license 10 beds, pay you the $100 or $300 or whatever the fee is, and develop my own little for-profit farm that I sell the produce to, at a farm stand on the side of the road? I mean, is there any restrictions to what people can use the beds for?
The thought that we've had has been that these would be for personal use. Typically, I think that it would be, you would have the ability to license one bed. Maybe in the startup, if somebody wanted to license two, you could get that, but, you know, realizing that your preference for the following year would be limited to one of those beds. I presume that if there are available beds, that the farm itself would probably put those to use to, you know, grow food for distribution at the pantry or through the mobile market. You know, you're right that we will need to factor in some additional staff, maybe an additional intern, but those are all doable. And you know, in the startup, there may be greater costs than what you're getting in from the rental of, as you suggest, 20% of the beds. So that's, you know, but that's, you know, part of it. The other one too is that I think when you look at these type of projects that are community building, that you have to look at the heuristics of the situation, that all of the, you know, the benefit might not be in terms to the town, may not be in terms of pure dollars and cents, or even to the farm. But the plan would be, and the intent is that this would be, you know, on an ongoing basis, available to members of the community to do this. So, you know, that's where, you know, we will look at the questions, we will try to answer them. I intend, I actually wanted to have this conversation before I went back to the select board, because before then I would say, I think I'm going to hear, but now I've heard. So, you know, that's fine with me on doing that.
Yeah, Joe, I just to kind of in closing, I really like the concept. I think it's great. I'd love to see restrictions on who can use it. I'm not necessarily enamored with the idea of somebody from Wellesley coming over and use our community farm just to pay a few extra bucks to do it. Nothing against the folks over at Wellesley, but I think it's great to have, you know, folks who can benefit from this, and that benefit could be because they can't, you know, it's a way to supplement their food source. I know the folks at Charles River Center have been down there, and you've worked with the folks there on some of their agricultural work, and I think it's wonderful. And I think that, you know, I think the concept is great. It's just need to get some of these little details worked out.
Yeah, the other, yeah, we're hoping actually the Charles River Center reinvigorates its agricultural program. I mean, it's taken a hit over the last couple of years, but we're still working together to see what we can do this coming season with them and getting some of their folks out there again.
Yeah, that's great. Thank you again, Mr. Chairman. I'm set. Thank you.
Thanks, Rob. Joe, I'm going to pick up on a couple of threads, if I may. I think just for clarity purposes, so the least raised bed program that you are proposing is not a program that is in existence now, right? That's not what NCF does presently, correct?
Correct.
Okay, so this is a new business.
It's in response when we talk to people and people who are contributors and otherwise take surveys. What would you like us to do? And it's always, we'd love to rent a bed.
Right. It makes logical sense. It does. And in fact, I always thought that's what the community farms do in the Fens, for example, right? That's what,
correct.
Traditionally, that's what I always thought, and community farms did. All right. So, but I think because this is a new, and this is a little bit out of my lane professionally, because I'm a lawyer and not a business guy or not a lender, but it seems to me that what would probably raise our comfort level is if we actually saw some sort of pro forma financial and projection and basically a business plan, because this is something new. One of the things that jumps out at me is I see that you're developing kind of an informal reserve fund for fencing of the entire acre or acre and a half that you're working on now. But it seems to me that we would, for one of the concerns that I have is, well, should we have a reserve fund to replace the beds? Because the cedar beds, from very personal experience, last about 10 years, right? They rot out and you got to replace them. So they're gonna, right? They have to be replaced. And that's probably, I don't know how much of that $200,000 it is, because I think the $82,000 figure is both cedar bed plus install, but plus I think the comp, right? So it seems to me that you may want to, as part of a business plan, you want to address the issue of replacement costs so that you can sustain the business, a reserve fund of some sort. But I don't want to tell you what has to be in there, but that's something that kind of jumps out at me as a concern, because, but one question that I have is what happens in 10 years? Are representatives of the community farms going to be here and say all their cedar beds rotted out and we would like, $80,000 to replace them? That's kind of an open question that I have to the committee, which is, should we be in that? Is that what we do? Do we provide seed money, or what do we do? So that's kind of I'm wondering if we can have a business plan that addresses those issues. And I think that would tie in to kind of tie together the requests that Reg Foster has made and the requests that Rick has made. But that's kind of my, thinking on that. But what do you say to that? Is that a crazy idea? Do you think that's workable? Have you thought about that?
Yeah, those are things that we and I have thought about. I've also been playing with ideas of treating the wood with some organically based oils that would probably extend the lifespan to like 15 years.
Okay. Yeah.
And I've been working with, been in contact with Black Earth a little bit about that, and I now have to go to the oil source, but it's one of those things that within the $200,000, it is a doable thing. I've been doing it on beds that I'm using, and 5 or 6 years in, you look at the beds and there's not the slightest hint of degradation. But there are those things. The question is, when you do these in many ways, if you look at a 10 years and you're doing it in your average is $100 a bed, it's $15,000. 10 years, it's $150,000. There is a certain limit. There's certain in the business model, it doesn't. You could probably come up with numbers that make it work. But part of it also in endeavors like this is when you're building community and you're doing things like this, you tend to also get an increase in community support philanthropically. And so that is one that, is often difficult to do. I mean, certainly one of the things that I've talked about and considered is that, what do you want? You'd all like a capital fund where you could, skim off each year, your 4% of income. But when you start looking at, a budget of $100,000, you need $1 million fund, and that's tough to raise. having been parts of capital campaigns, I know it's tough to raise. So yeah, we can come up with something. Is it going to be perfect? Is it going to be, tested? No. But I think that
Got it. Okay, like I said, it's a little bit out of my lane, right? Because I'm a lawyer and not a business guy, and my ask may have been unreasonable. It's one of these things that perhaps I should have tested with the.
no, nothing in this world is unreasonable when you're pressing somebody. What are you thinking about? No, it's good. It's good.
Okay. All right. So then the last question that I have, because by the way, thank you for devoting so much time, and you've been kind of through the ringer with us, but we're all friends. So is there some magic to the 150 bed number? Is there an economies of scale that you reach at 150 beds versus saying, let's start off on a baby step and start with 50 beds?
Yeah, there's always a certain economy of scale because one of those is, when you're dealing with these type of contractors, there's a certain amount of staging costs and other things. And when you go to, to expand the fenced area, you're paying a premium, doing it. Just like, if you've got a project at your home, we'll do 50% now, we'll do 50%. Well, it's $50,000 to do it now, but if we break it up into two projects, it's $75,000. And, I'm one of these people who, when dealing with, representing a not-for-profit, will go back to people. And I know that Black Earth, cut it to the bone, but it was a big project. We'll go back to some of these other folks and ask them to, cut it to the bone.
And they may have actually made their pricing relative to the 150 beds, right? There's some economies there for them. Okay. All right. That's it for me. Let's just do a quick fire around and see if anyone has any follow-up questions. And again, thank you for your patience, and all of the, and thanks, thanks for the work that you do. It's really important. And I agree with you about how it builds community. That's what we're trying to do in our, right? The people who participate in this volunteer form of government are committed to the idea of citizenship and community. And that your work is just another kind of thread in that. And that's important. So, all right, any other questions? A hand up by Bob Dermody. Bob Dermody.
Yes, thank you. And then to pick up on Rick Zambone line of thought, with respect to the finances, and if this was covered, excuse me, but of the money that the community farm has currently, are they going to contribute anything to this 200,000? Are you able to? I think sometimes that helps at town meeting. It's like, yeah, we're kicking in a little, and then we're looking for help.
Well, I'm glad you asked that question. We'll go back and look at it.
Great. And I'm not saying an amount, but I think it's the intention and the spirit of it. So thank you, Joe.
All right. Thank you, Bob.
All right. Hand up is Artie. Oh, wait, actually, Joe Barnes first and then Artie Crocker. Joe Barnes.
Just a quick one, Joe, the estimated cost of the project, are they fairly firm, or is it, are they kind of wild estimates? Or are they're close to what they anticipate will be the actual cost of the installation?
Yeah, with the usual caveats that nobody knows what things are going to look like in the spring. Things could be a lot better. Who knows? In some respects. I mean, certainly lumber has taken a hit, especially with, the cross border with Canada, where lumber prices have really escalated. But I asked people to give me an estimate of what they thought it would cost doing it in the summer and fall of 2022.
Okay. Are these low bidders? Have you gotten bids from more than one contractor?
No, and I spent hours trying to get people to bid. Oftentimes when I've gone to contractors, they've said, do you have the money in hand? And if it was, no, I don't, I have no interest. It has been really, it's been really tough. We have a relationship with Black Earth, why they did it, and they have a relationship with organic soils. So it was one of those that, but it's been really tough getting people's attention.
Okay, thank you. That's all.
Thanks. And Artie Crocker.
Yeah, just again, you probably covered this, but might as well beat this horse. And that is obviously it's not a business. And so we don't have to directly compete against Wellesley per se or other towns as far as what they're charging. And so where again did the value of the rental cost come from, and the reason why we wouldn't go higher? That's all.
Did you understand that question, Joe? That because
it begs this question. We can go higher, but then it's like college tuition. There's the nominal charge, and then there's the average cost, and all of the financial aid is just trying to sort out how much people can afford to pay. If people can afford to pay, you pay the $70,000 a year, and other people, pay nothing, which is fine. But there's a lot of time and effort spent in trying to evaluate the ability to pay with regard to each candidate. And when you're starting to think about that in terms of managing it, how much staff time are you going to put into that? And what does it affect? If you say it's $200, but your average cost is, your average take is still $100, and you've spent a lot of money trying to make that sort, that affects that business model and what you're doing with your dollars.
I can appreciate, obviously there are some people that will not be able to afford, and obviously we're looking as a nonprofit, as a community, you're looking to, the first priority is that you want people there learning and understanding and being part of the community. So I can appreciate that. Certainly there are a number of people that can afford, and as we know, creating a garden is incredibly expensive.
Yeah, the other technique is, one time running something for Christ Church, there used to be the fee for going away on the men's retreat was $300. When I put down suggested donation $300, the average take that year was $400.
okay.
In any case, that's just a thought. Okay.
Okay, I think, are we
Peter,
yes,
Peter,
go ahead, Joe.
Can I just say, I thank you for all your time. I've taken notes, but I would hope that as you collect the questions, if you could, or Cecilia, send me an email with, the bullet pointed questions. So I've got something to go back to my board with and say, here are the questions that we need to answer. That would make my job easier.
Yeah, we will compile them, and you will receive them hopefully in one email. Okay.
Okay, great. Thank you, Peter.
Good. All right. Thank you again, Joe.
All right. Take care.
All right.
Bye.
Okay.
Thank you, Joe.
Okay. That was okay. There you go. We are done now with our 2023-11 Needham Community Farm presentation. Artie, your hand is still up, just noting the technology note. And now we will go on to FY 2023-09, the boat launch, sponsored by Park and Rec. And Cecilia, will you reveal the presenter, please?
Yep, I'm going to promote a couple of different people.
Presenters.
There we go. All right, I think we're good. So we have Stacy, Dennis from Ty and Bond, Karis, and Tom Ryder, the acting town engineer. I believe everyone knows Stacy and Karis. So with that, we'll let Dennis kind of kick it off.
Sure. Thank you, everybody. Are you sharing documents, Cecilia, or is that me?
Whatever is easiest for you.
If you have them up, or I can pull them up.
Yep, I have them up, so I will share.
Okay. Sure. Awesome. I appreciate it. Thank you. So we have been working, Ty and Bond has been working with Park and Recs in the engineering department for more than a year to move this project along. Park and Recs has a goal of using the existing access point on South Street and improving that access point to the Charles River to provide better access for the general public down to the river. We have, on behalf of the town in Parks and Recs, submitted a notice of intent in front of the Conservation Commission. And that is kind of where the project is right now. To give an overview, she's pulling up the drawings now. Thank you. There's an existing parking lot for anybody that's not familiar with the area that provides parking. There's an existing pathway that does not allow vehicles down to the water's edge, and the transition between the pathway and the water is very poor. Not only is there's the potential for slips, trips, and falls, it also promotes erosion to the area. I know Artie is familiar with this project. I've spoken with, he's heard the project a few times in front of the commission. And then, so the overall goal is to improve access to allow vehicles and the public to drive down to the edge of the water to offload human-powered vessels. The goal is not to promote motor vehicles, or sorry, motor-driven vessels into the Charles River, but to provide better access for the general public to enjoy the natural beauty of the Charles. So there is additional work to be done that includes permitting in front of the planning board because the area is within floodplain, and then the funds being sought for this project also include construction administration, additional engineering, bid level documents, as well as the actual capital funds to construct the project, which includes a concrete access ramp, picnic tables, parking improvements, plantings, removal of some invasive species, as well as the widening of the path that's generally 5 feet to approximately 12 feet, inclusive of a turnaround. And that's kind of a very high level portion of the project. So it's in a permit level stage. Final design hasn't been completed yet. And that's where we are. So it's been in front of the Conservation Commission twice. And we are scheduled to present again on, I believe, the 24th or the week of the 24th, that Thursday. So Thursday, the 24th. It stalled a little while due to Tony's passing, but the commission or the boat ramp committee is interested in picking it back up and moving it along. And I guess I'm not sure if Tom has anything else to add to that, or Karis. Or I could just open it up to questions. And I think you're muted, Peter.
All right, let me just make sure. So, all right, so does that conclude the presentation by the proponents? As best you know, Dennis? And does anyone else have anything to add in terms of the presentation, primary presentation? I assume they may be here to answer questions. I see Karis Karis's hand is up. Okay, okay, go ahead, Karis.
Hi, how's everybody doing?
It's
Been a long
all
time.
going.
Nice to see you, Karis.
Nice
Yeah.
to see you, Karis.
So I just wanted to give a little bit of the history on the funding side of it. I think Dennis did an excellent job explaining the design and the process we've gone through. But I believe it was about 5 years ago, the Park and Rec Commission and the Select Board co-sponsored a proposal that was approved by the CPC and then approved by town meeting to design the boat launch at this particular site off of South Street. There was some delays in our own internal process as far as getting a design process in place. We had some transitions at various levels of the town, including in Park and Rec and in DPW. And so the real work of designing this particular project really didn't start until I think it was the spring of 2020, if not the fall of 2020. So we had requested funds and we followed up on the project that was approved to provide design. And this is sort of the next natural extension of that, which would be to seek funding to construct the design as we had proposed it.
Okay, thank you, Karis. Now, are there any other statements on behalf of the proponents in the initial presentation? Okay, so now why don't we open it up to questions, and we'll follow our usual ground rules and we'll go in alphabetical order. Maybe I think it'd be best if we took down the screen share just so we all can see each other on the Zoom presentation. All right.
And if anybody wants to see any of the pictures or maps or anything at any point, just let me know and I will find them and then bring them up.
Okay. Okay. How about if we go in reverse alphabetical order? Let's do that. Okay, let's mix it up. Because I saw Rick Zambone taking a nap there, and I want to take advantage of that. All right, Rick, we're going to start with you. Rick, questions.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. And I sincerely hope that you can do this in the proper sequence going backwards in the alphabet. I have faith in you.
I have a list.
Oh, good. Basically, I'm once again going to come at this from a financial perspective. And I'm doing this in anticipation of the day when our chairman appears before the finance committee. And he has to explain the breakdown of the finances for this project. And as I took a quick look at it, approximately $121,000. This is in the email that Cecilia sent to us just before the meeting. 121,000 are basically the hard costs associated with the project. And then when you look at it, it's about $80,000 worth of contingency on a $120,000 project. And then there's $84,000 for permitting, bidding, construction, administration. Those numbers just kind of scream that they're out of whack. And I'm anticipating that we're going to get a question from at least one member of the finance committee as to why the contingency costs are equal to 2/3 of the project hard costs. And maybe someone at least can, not necessarily today, but as a follow-up, come back to us with a little more detail so that when our chair appears before the finance committee, he can readily explain this.
Yeah, so we can definitely get you some more information. I'm going to kind of play double duty here as both CPC liaison and part of the proponent side of this request, having done some of the financials on this. But basically, because we don't have a final design yet, we wanted to build in some extra contingency in case things were thrown at us that we needed to include, including during the permitting process, to be able to get through that in case there was anything in addition that we did not think of that was requested at the last minute. But also with the way that the markets are going right now, we are seeing a lot of our projects, both in materials costs and in our biddings, or in our bids that we're receiving back, just coming in at way higher costs than we have anticipated. So we did build in a much larger contingency than one is our norm, but also than we've previously seen, just because everything's a little up in the air right now.
Then that begs the question, why don't we consider doing this project in 2 phases? First phase is design, second phase is construction, where we can get the design more definitive so that we don't have to carry such a high contingency number.
So I would just speak to the general struggles that we have in public works as far as municipal financing and construction goes, because the process that we have normally, which I'm sure you're all aware, is we put our budgets together in the summer of the year. We submit that to the town manager. It gets vetted through their process. It then goes into the CPC process in December. Then we go to town meeting in May. The struggles that we have is the construction season in New England is a relatively short construction season. And so getting work done within a 12-month period of receiving funds when we receive them effectively on July 1st of that year can be a bit of a struggle. So really the reason that we put it forth for this year as opposed to delaying a year was in order to get a project underway and hopefully executed in the spring of 23. Putting a delay on the project and waiting until we go through the permitting process to finish to put in an application would have simply meant a delay of a year. So that's really the reasoning behind why this application is coming in now as opposed to delaying it a year.
Understood, Karis. I'm just looking at it from the perspective of there's so much contingency money, and you know, and that's really high. I understand the reasons for it being high, but you know, I mean, because you never know. The Conservation Commission may impose restrictions that it's going to, you know, balloon the cost of the project, may not even make it economical to proceed with. I have no idea, you know, and I don't know what type of restrictions they can impose. The same thing with the planning board. There may be restrictions there that could add significantly to the cost. Again, it's unknown, and I fully appreciate that's the reason why the contingencies are so high. I guess it's just a question of timing, and to delay the project 1 year for a little bit more certainty in the cost might just be the prudent way to go. That's all.
Okay, any other questions or comments, Rick?
No, I'm all set. Thank you, sir.
Okay, good. All right, Jean McKnight.
Yes, I was trying to look up on a map and see, doesn't the town of Dedham, or within the town of Dedham anyway, is it right across the river that there is another boat launch? Have I got the wrong street? I thought it was off Dedham, off Route 135. You know what I'm speaking of, the boat launch that's in Dedham?
There is a boat launch in Dedham. I'm not super familiar with it, but I am aware that there is one in.
Is it right across the river from what we're proposing?
So it's not right across.
Go ahead.
It's not right across the river. It is further down the river. There's actually, Cecilia, I believe you have a map of all the boat, if I'm not mistaken, we have a map of the boat launches along our section of the.
Good. That's what I'm looking for.
As a point of information, it's 13 miles down the river. The river winds around.
Oh, so it's off, now I see. It's off Great Plain Avenue. Right. It's not off Route 135. Okay, now I understand. Thank you. I just want, you know, it seemed to me to have it right across the river. It didn't make sense. So I wanted to make sure it wasn't that. Okay. Well, in general, I think Needham should have more opportunities for connection with our river. The river is such a wonderful feature of this town, surrounding it on 3 sides, and it's practically invisible. And, you know, as far as public enjoyment of riverfront experiences. So I can see the question. I think the question about why not divide it into a design and construction project, 2 separate projects in 2 separate years is a good question, though, with the cost being so uncertain. So we'll have to think about that more.
Okay. All right. Thank you, Jean, for your question and your comment. Let's go to Chris Gerstle. Chris, do you have any questions or comments?
No, not at this time. I mean, being involved with Park and Rec and actually part of the boat dock launch committee, very familiar with this project. I mean, speaking with Dennis and Karis and Stacy about this, you know, there are some valid questions out there, but this is a project that we see as something that has been on our radar for a while with the select board as a common goal, and really look forward to a project like this being done so people can have access to one of the natural wonders that we have surrounding the town, as Jean just brought up.
Okay, thank you, Chris. All right, so, and that's it, right? That's your comment. Okay, good. Let's go to Reg Foster. Questions or comments by Reg?
Yes, hi. I also agree that this is a worthy project. Actually, if you go hunt down that map that Cecilia flashed up on the screen, I was very impressed because between the two, one of my questions to Tom Ryder is between the upstream dam and the downstream dam, there's 15 miles of canoeable river, it appears, if I'm reading that map right. I wanted to ask the proponents if that was true.
It's not 15.
Yeah, it's from where we're going. We're at, you know, if you look at where we are here, you can go upstream to mile 13. This is a map from the other boat launch that I think we were talking about. See, and then if you go all the way downstream, downstream from where we would be, and go winding around the corner, and part of the corner is hidden by my little tiles here. Maybe I can move the tiles here. And you go all the way down to the other, it's off the top of the map that is being displayed here, but you can see it in your packet. It's the Charles River, it's the Kendrick Street, Charles River Canoe and Kayak launch map that we're looking at here. So you can get that mile 0 there, and then you can go further downstream to mile 2 before you hit the Silk Mill Dam. So, you know, you're actually liberating. And by the way, I'm the support person for the proponent here. So I've been into the weeds with Tom Ryder. Thank you very much, Tom, for all of this. But that was really an eye opener for me. Speaking in support of the proponents as the CPC liaison here, that's 13 miles upstream to Charles River Canoe and Kayak Center, and 2 miles downstream, 15 miles. That is a gigantic water resource. And that goes to Gene McKnight's comment. I think it was Gene who said that, you know, this is sort of a hidden treasure that we, you know, just drive across on bridges, but never take advantage of. So I just wanted to point that out for everybody's benefit. Back to questions though, and you can drop the map if you want, but I agree with Rick's questions. And I agree with Karis's response, which is it's hard to fit projects into the CPC funding approval cycle and, you know, money wise, and deal with, you know, from year to year, things that need to be done in the construction window here. But I do think better clarity than having, you know, 70% contingency is probably a very good idea. We've all been before the FinCom in one form or another. The second thing is goes to the the Concom approval process. In this meeting coming up on the 24th, are we expecting that to be the final meeting? And after that, we're going to get an order of conditions?
May I answer that, Peter?
I say yes for
sure.
Peter.
Yeah, that's absolutely.
Okay, so yeah, so this has come to us before, and we have expressed grave concerns about this project. grave concerns. I mean, there was comment about what the conservation might do as far as restrictions, which might increase the cost. I would argue if it's quite the opposite. We might pose something with restrictions which greatly reduce the project. We've gotten a lot of, a lot of community, a lot of neighbors talking about this. Even without those neighbors talking about this, we've looked at this and say, what is this, how does this fit into the charge of the Conservation Commission and what we're trying to do? And the Conservation Commission, the rivers, I mean, it already has some access to it. So it's not like it's not accessible at all. This just kind of increases the access with a fairly wide road going down to that, which we have not expressed very much support for at all.
All right, but well, wait a minute. Have there been have there been formal votes taken by the Conservation Commission on this?
There have not been any formal
Okay.
votes, and so do I expect us to finalize this thing in 2 weeks? No, I don't necessarily expect that this may be finalized in 2 weeks.
Okay.
I mean, this is, in my view, this is very much the cart before the horse, because
All
I mean,
right. Let me ask you this. When do you expect the Conservation Commission to vote, if you will, whatever it is that you issue the order of conditions, whatever it is? What's the next action Concom is going to take on this?
Well, the next action Concom I would expect is that we are going to, in which we have already, the Conservation Commission has already stated that we do not have a lot of support for what's being presented to us, and we're looking at something much smaller. But what I'm seeing coming here is it's still the exact same thing that was presented before. So when this comes back to us on 2 weeks from tomorrow, if that's when the date is when it's coming back to us, I don't know what our reaction is going to be. Put it bluntly.
Okay.
I really
All right. So,
don't
but
know.
in 2 weeks, they're gonna be back before you in 2 weeks, and then some action, but you're not sure what is going to be taken.
It maybe go back and bring us something different, or it may just reject it.
Okay, good. But
I don't know.
all right, then, but that answers the question, which is
Yeah.
basically we don't know. That's
Which
the
is
answer.
why I asked the question.
That's it. That's right. So
Now,
the answer to
having
the
some
question is-
familiarity knows I have some familiarity with the conservation commissions.
Yeah.
But coming back to my questions, so you also referenced somebody, one of the, whether it's Karis, I forget who was presenting, maybe somebody else, Dennis was, that there had been 2 prior meetings in the Conservation Commission. There's one reference that I could find in the packet, which was the October 14th, 2021 meeting. What was the other date of the other meeting?
I believe it was November 3rd, but don't hold me to it.
Okay, great. So
I believe it was 2 weeks after.
all right, great. So it was a 2, meeting thing, November 8th. So is it, I went looking for the minutes of those meetings when I was doing my homework, and they aren't posted on the town website. Is it possible to get copies of the minutes of both of those meetings?
I don't.
All right.
I
So
don't know right now if we voted on them. I can imagine that they would be finished at that point. I'll put a request into. I'll send a request right now.
There is about
hold
6
on,
months
wait,
behind on
okay,
minutes.
Hold on. All right. It's
Hmm.
not a private conversation between you and Artie. Okay, so this is a request for information. The proponents don't have the information. Okay. Our staff person can manage this problem. Okay, so this is a request that we'll make to Cecilia. Cecilia, let's see if we can get the minutes of the Concom meeting for, what date is it, Reg? Or what is it?
So October 14th and November 8th is what
Okay.
was said.
All right, good, that's it. All right, the next question.
So getting to the neighbors, it was sort of interesting in looking at the packet, because actually some of the neighbors within the 100-foot circle needed to be checked with our Dedham neighbors across the river, which makes sense, I guess. And but I noticed that the 100-foot circle didn't encompass all of Crescent Drive and Churchill Lane. And I didn't have enough time to go through the packet, so I'm sure I could have missed this. But it seems to be only a portion of the neighbors in the logical neighborhood were noticed and checked with, and through the Conservation Commission process. Is that true, or did you hit everybody in the Crescent Lane or Crescent Circle neighborhood. I guess it's Crescent Circle and Churchill Lane seems to me would be the ones that would be interested.
I guess I'll answer that. The butters within 100 feet of the property were notified, but I'm not aware that anybody outside of the formal notice of intent process was notified as part of like, I'm guessing you're getting to like a public outreach type of process.
I'm just asking if you did anything beyond the minimum required by the regulations.
So the notice of intent process of this project did not go beyond the 100 feet or 150 foot buffers for abutters. I'm not sure if Chris has probably worked on this longer, and I know you're sitting on the other side of the table, Chris, so I apologize, but it was probably before my time if there was any public outreach of the additional abutters in the area, or residents, I should say. Thank you, Cecilia. So this is when you file a notice of intent with the assessor's office helps pull that together, and they.
Yep, I understand.
Okay.
So because I noted what Artie said about there was a fair amount of neighbor concern, and well, and of course you of course put illegal notices in the paper. So I guess all those neighbors who read the legal notices every week and Needham Times, formally got noticed. Is that?
That would be a
That's
true
what
statement.
we're relying on, I guess. Okay. My last question is I'm a little surprised, but it probably just is my ignorance of these sorts of things. But I thought there was a whole Charles River watershed thing where you actually had to get state permits if you're going to stick anything in the water, be a boat ramp, be it a dock or something that sticks into the Charles River. Is that basically all overseen by the Conservation Commission, or is there another sort of state permit that's required to do anything like this?
So this project is outside the limits of the Charles River. If you're interested in a little history, I can go into it, or we could just pass that. But your statement is correct. If this was within the water of the Charles River, we would need it's a navigable waterway, would need a Chapter 91 license, etc. But the limit of work for this project, based on direction that we received from the town, was to keep it outside the actual bed of the river or the limits of the water, so that all that additional permitting work would not have to be completed. So this was.
Can I ask a follow-up then? Maybe
Yep.
I missed something there, but I thought there was going to be a sort of a concrete boat ramp where you could back trailers down.
It's not going to be into the mean high water mark. So that's correct. It's that concrete ramp is not going into the water. It's abutting the water.
So the trailer then, the mean low water mark, the trailer then bumps down over dirt or gravel and so forth and slides the boat into the water that way.
Exactly. Or the person that was launching the vessel can carry that boat in. So it's mostly for rooftop vehicles, small human powered vessels, but these are, something that most people can pick up and carry.
Okay.
It's not to provide somebody with a 24-foot motorboat's not going to go drop this thing in there, but it's to increase the accessibility for most people to get their boats down to the water.
Yeah, and I can certainly understand why, I assume you know the regulations a million times better than I do here. So I do know the Charles River does, the mean high water mark for the Charles River is a number, but the Charles River regularly floods much higher than the mean high water mark that would flood over that concrete apron. That's not an issue with the state, I take it.
That's correct. So it's outside the jurisdictional area, and Very true statement. Once you cross that line, it goes from a conservation permit to,
A big, a lot of other stuff you have to do, and I won't,
yes.
yes. Okay.
So it's a balancing act of, limiting the impacts for the environment and, reducing access of somebody driving their vehicle or their trailer into the water.
Those are my questions, Peter. Thank you.
Okay, thank you, Rich. Okay, Laura Dorfman, questions?
I have none. Thank you so much.
Okay. And Bob Dermody, question.
Yes, thank you, Mr. Chair, and all the presenters, and for the documentation. So I have two kind of different areas of questioning. One has to do with parking. So I see, if I'm interpreting correctly, 4 designated spots on site. Whomever, maybe the town, the conservation, whomever is talking about this, what about if there's more people who want to use their boats that day? Like, has this just been talked through and thought through? I envision cars getting started to be parked on the side of South Street, which we all know is a busy street. So I don't know if there's a question in there, but I guess the question is, has that been discussed?
That was discussed this past fall or previous summer in 2021. The goal of the project was to not increase the disturbed area of the parking lot. So if you do like the existing compared to the proposed, the areas, I won't say exactly the same, generally the same, but and to actually limit parking. So the first draft or conceptual figure, we presented DPW as they acted as the liaison between the boat committee and Ty and Bond. Typically most of the clients I work with is like, we want to stuff as many cars in this area as we can. And you can actually get more cars in that area, but the goal was to actually limit the usage or limit the number of parking spots so it wasn't overused and overcrowded. But I do understand, people parking on South Street would be a concern that.
Yeah, maybe that's more of a question for the town proponents. I'm not speaking for or against any size or number of spaces. It's just, just the natural course of things at these kinds of sites. So I just want to bring that up. Then the second one was, and might be for Karis or Cecilia or somebody, but about help me understand the funding. And in the document, I see that there was all but $1 of the 30,000 spent already on design, but then we're still buying more design in this next phase. That is a question I predict or might be interesting to talk about at town meeting. People may have even forgot we voted for this. It will come back up, and I'm sure you've thought about it. So very briefly, can you just help me understand what's the difference between the 30,000 we've already spent and then the portion that we're trying to think about giving you now with respect to design?
Yeah, so basically the 30,000 was for the preliminary design and all the work up until this spot. It is difficult to anticipate how many meetings they were going to need. I think we had built in for one permitting meeting, and we've already gone through more. And then any changes that come from the permitting, as well as bid documents and construction administration, are included in the construction cost as opposed to the design cost, just because they are more tied to the physical construction. We want to make sure that we have the designer on board to help provide oversight as the project is going underway.
Okay, thanks. That's helpful. One quick follow-up. So of the 30,000, is there a ballpark percentage of design you could say that 30,000 got us X percent of the design and we're finishing it up now and then go into construction? Is that guessable, estimatable?
Sure. These would be, and pending, this could all get thrown out the window depending on changes for Conservation Commission. So I'm not going to guarantee.
Understood. Yeah.
But I would generally say this is a 60 to 70%, 65% permit level design. From there, the final details, including like a package of specifications and contract documents, to get, publicly biddable documents that is the more or less industry standard with the AIA forms and
right.
Bonding, et cetera. So that's about a 60%, 70% design, somewhere in that area.
So that the 30,000 we spent starting in 2015 was about the 60-70%. It got us that far.
Yeah, so that included a wetlands delineation,
Yep.
survey. So there, those are field work as well as public hearings and meetings, except, everything. else.
Okay, thank you. That's helpful. No further questions, Mr. Chair.
Okay, thank you. All right, and Artie Crocker.
So one couple of questions, of course, obviously in this case. So since you were before the Conservation Commission twice, and you heard what was being stated as far as what our thoughts were, and our thoughts were, I think, clearly heading towards a smaller access path going down there. Let's call it that. Has there been any request to change what design you have presented? Are you going to come to us with the exact same design that you've already come to us before?
Artie, I'm going to just talk. Wait a minute, Artie. I don't want you to litigate your Conservation Commission questions in.
Okay.
I mean,
Okay,
we spent. We're on our second out.
No,
okay.
that's actually
Okay,
fair.
so
Yeah, Peter,
stay
that's
in the
fair
lane
enough.
of. Okay, stay in the lane.
No, that's probably fair enough. Okay, I get it. Okay, what is your plan for the proposal, depending if the Conservation Commission does not approve this plan?
So I think, as you heard right now, where we've gotten with the funding we've received got us to a 65% design. We don't have additional funding to redesign this project at the moment. If we do need to make some significant changes to the design and move forward, we will have to look at seeking funding specifically to redo the design. And I think also an internal conversation about whether or not those changes would potentially compromise safety for people using the facility, to see if that's an avenue that we would pursue. So you may see us amending our amount or amending our scope to look at just seeking funding to revisit another 65 or 70% design for permitting.
And what is the timeline as far as you, depending on the vote of the Conservation Commission in a couple of weeks, what is your timeline as far as then coming back with an alternative presentation for the CPC funding to get to town meeting? If the Conservation Commission says no, what is your timeline as far as them being able to come back and request something different and still get to town meeting?
So it really depends on where we get to, I guess, at our next commission meeting, and what clarity we have then. But I would think early March, we would come back with a revised proposal that would look at altering the request to revisit another conceptual 65% design so we can get to permitting with an amended scope.
Okay, thank you. I guess the only other thing is I've heard comments about access to the river and so forth, and having it be, this isn't directly to you, Karis, this is just a generalized scope, and I'm not advocating for the Conservation Commission, just as member of the town. That is that, we're talking about access to the river, so we're talking about, we have our river in town as our natural resource. The part of that natural resource is keeping it as is. So that's it. That's all.
Mr. Chair, if I may, I'd just like to compare it to another project that was done jointly between DPW, the Select Board, and Park and Rec, and it actually affects and impacts the same neighborhood, which is the all access persons path around the reservoir. We had a lot of the same feedback when we approached that project as well, where people were concerned. We had a goat's path that went around the reservoir. It went onto the, there's an access path actually for the wells that were back there, as well as some areas that went on top of the golf course. And there was a path that a person who was fully able-bodied and willing to brush up against brush and get ticks and that sort of thing was able to utilize. So there was an amenity there. And we decided as a community to put forward a proposal to expand access to that particular facility and make it really accessible. And I think it's been, I've just seen it through the pandemic, such an amazing attraction for the community to have. So whether or not this project moves forward, I think the intention is exactly the same with this type of project, is that we have an amenity in Dedham, which is access to this river. Some people currently do have access to it, those who are able-bodied, who can carry a canoe or a kayak. down to the facility. And all we're simply, while Park and Rec and the select board and Public Works is looking at is enhancing that amenity so it can be available for more individuals. And whether or not we choose to move forward with that in various committees, whether it's you or other regulatory committees, is really a decision based on what kind of expansion of access we have versus balancing all the other interests that we have in the community.
Thank you. Thank you very much. That's very helpful, Karis. Okay. All right. Now, Joe Barnes, do you have questions?
Not so much a questions, a couple of comments. I think it's certainly a very worthwhile project. Our articulate comrades here today have spoken about the great resource we have within our town, and making it more accessible is certainly a worthwhile thing. I guess the unknowns are what are concerning. Based on what Artie has said about the Conservation Commission, the reference to the neighbors pushing back, I guess I would need more information before I could ask a cogent question or add any kind of support. It seems as though we need information coming forward before we can make an informed decision about whether this is worthwhile in this stage or whether it has to be revised. So I'll take a wait-see attitude at this stage. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Okay, thank you. All right, so now we're in our quickfire round here. Any additional questions or comments by any members? Reg Foster.
Yeah, listening to this, and I just want to reiterate, I think this is a great idea to do. I think this is the right thing to do, but it is a complicated project. It's a seemingly very simple project, with a lot of implications. And one of the things I thought of, and then this is Peter, I promise you, right after the meeting's over, I'm going to send you all these questions along with Cecilia, okay? But I think in my role as as the advocate, the supporter of this project here. One more question, looking ahead to town meeting and looking forward to, the inevitable NIMBY dimensions that sometimes projects like this stir up is a variant of the question I asked about the notification of neighbors. And that is, think of the neighbors not in the 100-foot circle around somebody who's tearing down their garage and building a new garage, which is what the 100-foot, regulation is all about. This is a completely different project where the neighbors are up and down the banks of a 13-mile river that runs through, our border, but on the other side is, of course, other towns. And if you launch your canoe off of our boat launch and paddle upstream and decide to pull over on the bank and spread out a picnic or have a party, are you on public land or are you on somebody's private land when you're doing that?
Wait, well, are you, is that a question?
Well, in other words,
first was a comment. I don't understand this.
I'll explain. It's again the notification. If this goes in and all of a sudden there are lots of people pulling off and having picnics, and nobody knew about it, then down the road there's going to be kind of a lot of aggravation that maybe we can, nip at the bud at this point of the project here. So. In other words, the notification thing troubles me, and I'm not trying to cause trouble for tonight's project, tonight's presentation, but I just think anticipating those questions when you get to town meeting might be a good idea to do.
Okay, do the proponents understand that question or comment? Okay, good. All right, good. All right, all right. So any other? All right, now we have a hand up by Ricks and Bo.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. In light of some of the discussion that's come back and forth on this with respect to the Conservation Commission, I'd like to request that we get some type of a permitting timeline that talks about not only the activities through the Conservation Commission, but whatever other approval process you need, be it planning board or whatever it might be, before you can actually proceed with the next phase of design. Because all of these commissions, committees, and maybe I don't have them all, but anyone who has jurisdiction is going to have want to weigh in with their own 2 cents. And I'd like to get a sense as to conceivably how long that could take, that process could take. Being an optimist, maybe the Conservation Commission will approve it in 2 weeks. Being a pessimist, it might be 6 months. So I'm not sure how you're going to do that, but the best guess you can make, I think, would be helpful as we start to consider the timing of the project and whether it could be even funded this year. So if I could make that request.
Okay, and I just want to reiterate, everyone's been very active in their various requests and the questions that they posed, and put the responsibility on those who are asking those questions to forward that information in written form to our staff. Our staff's going to work on remembering this. I've been taking notes. Just want to make sure that this all gets into a written document to each of the proponents. Okay, so all right, so that's now Stacy, Jean, I'll call you next, but Stacy Mulroy had her hand up. And so Stacy, do you still have a comment?
Yes, I know it's not typical for me to be this quiet, so I want to jump in and just say that the Park and Recreation Department and Commission is very supportive of this project. It works with our goals, select board goals, and working with DPW. And I just want to reiterate how much Karis talked about the inclusion and accessibility for this option. As you know, right now, if you are not able-bodied and not fairly strong or strong-willed, it's tough to get a boat in the water right now. So I just wanted to put our support behind this project.
Okay, thank you.
I'll be weirdly quiet again.
Okay, that's quite all right. Thank you. I appreciate that. All right, Rick Simbo, question or comment?
Take my hand down, Peter, sorry.
All right, hand is down. All right, any other questions or comments by any committee members? Okay, good. So that is going to conclude.
And Peter.
And oh, sorry, Jean, I apologize.
Yeah.
I'm sorry,
With regard to the request for a permitting timeline, as a member of the planning board, I kind of doubt that a project like this requires any planning board approval. But if any of the staff people want a kind of a liaison to explore that, I'd be glad to perform that role. Of course, our building commissioner, Dave Roach, is the key person here.
I can answer that for you, Jean. Because
Yes.
within the floodplain, your ordinance or your bylaws require that it may be zoning. We have to go in front of zoning board, not planning.
Oh, the zoning board. Oh,
All right, I misspoke on that, but it has to go in front of zoning because it's within the 100-year chance of annual flooding.
oh, okay. Well, then I guess you've got the answer. You don't need me to be involved, but I just want to offer.
But we appreciate it.
Mhm.
Okay, I think that concludes the presentation by the proponents for FY 2023-09, our boat launch, and want to thank you all for coming. And now we will move on to our next agenda item, which is a discussion of our currently pending applications. So this
Thanks,
is
everybody.
all right. Thank you again. Nice seeing you all. Okay.
Thank you.
Great
All right,
job.
so this is a discussion of our currently pending applications, and what we usually like to do is I ask each of the proponents if they have any additional information regarding each of the pending applications. And traditionally, we've also used it to pose additional questions or have some other short discussion. Okay, so I'll start with, I'll go with FY 2023-01 and 02 and 04. I'm going to combine those. Those are the Needham Housing Authority requests first request for a property conditions report second request for detailed analysis of redevelopment of Linden Chambers. And the fourth request is for the hiring of an executive director to assist, assistant executive director to assist Needham Housing Authority in its ambitious plans to redevelop its properties. So those are all the liaisons on those are Zimbone, Dorfman, and Gersel. The main proponent on behalf of Needham Housing Authority is our very own Reg Foster. So questions and comments and discussion points on those three applications. First, I'll start with the proponent, with the liaisons. Updates, questions, comments.
Peter, I had a conversation earlier today with the esteemed Mr. Foster about the timeline that we could expect to get updated cost information. And he indicated sometime in the next week or so. Is that fair?
Yes.
That we would have that information. So that will enable us to plug that information into our developing financial model for the next 5-year expenditure plan. I'm just trying to think of what else, if there was anything else. No, I think that's it that I have. Others may have something else.
Okay, so that's Rick and Laura or Chris. Any questions, comments, further discussion points?
Laura, if you got anything, go ahead.
So just really quickly, because it's getting really late. In my attempt to help the Historical Commission update their portion of the CPA plan, I stumbled upon the fact that East Militia Heights was listed on the state inventory of historical places. I researched that. I'm condensing a lot of stuff
I think
into a
Peter
small
was
amount of time.
trying to carve that out and talk about that next. We're on applications.
Okay,
1,
can
2,
I
and
just
4.
finish though, Reg?
Yeah,
Can I
yeah.
finish what I'm saying? Okay, thank you. In any event, we looked into why it was listed on the state inventory. I talked to Edward Bell, who's a person of authority in that organization. Basically said that it was proposed to be listed in the early 70s by the Department of the Interior. It was then addressed by, I can't remember who, in the 80s, by a letter saying that it was not historically significant. And so I have spoken with the Historical Commission, and this is not official, but the feeling is that it is not a historically significant property. And so Reg and I have been talking about that, and that's where I'm going to leave it for now unless I'm missing anything. And so Reg, please go ahead if I've missed something.
All right, so wait a minute, you're referring to the Militia Heights.
Yeah, the East Militia
East
Heights
Militia Heights.
property.
Okay, that's fine. Okay, good.
Yeah, yeah.
All right,
Thank
all
you.
right. All right, so now we'll pick that up, pick that thread up in our next, that's good. Laura, we'll pick that thread up when we discuss the acquisition, which is 03. And so we'll stick with 01, 02, and 04 for now, if Reg has any further information for that or comments for those.
Yes. Adding to what Rick reported, there are a number of other things that we have as action items or additional questions to answer and so forth. For also the suggestion we produce a Q&A or a fact sheet or something like for town meeting and so forth. So those are all in progress, and I expect them to be also done by end of next week and submitted to Cecilia, and we'll be ready to go over all of those supplementary materials and questions at our next CPC meeting. timelines, the Q&A, the final numbers on, application number 1. We have bids. Now we have hard numbers on everything where it was a little squishy before. There was a request to add contingencies, numbers that we've considered, and where that seems to be a good idea, we've put that in and so forth. So those are all on track to answer all of the known questions that are outstanding still.
All right, good. So now let's go. Anyone else with comments or questions on 01, 02, and 04? All right, let's quickly go to 03, and that is the proposed acquisition of East Militia.
So
property.
Peter, Mr.
Yes.
Chairman, so sorry, I wasn't thinking of the numbers you were talking about.
Oh, that's
I just-
okay.
I apologize.
No, that's no problem. Watch, we're gonna handle this seamlessly. Because what I'm going to start with is, if you have anything to add to what Laura provided to us, the information concerning, is the property subject to some sort of historical significance by one of the two different regulating, designating bodies involved, and if you have anything to add to that, why don't you can do that now, so why don't you, or you could speak to that. Does that make sense?
I have nothing to add to Laura's report, so.
All right, good. Okay, and so, all right, so now let's just open it up generally to 03, which is, this is again, the acquisition of, proposed acquisition of Militia, the Militia property. Any other additional questions or comments by any members of the committee?
Well, let me just add, using your protocol, that the other update is the big, huge, $50,000, $60,000 question mark is the appraisal. And so that is just arrived this evening in draft form. So that's being looked over. And that also is on track to be released, early next week at the latest, unless, some error is discovered when you're reviewing the draft here. So
Okay.
we'll have at least the appraiser's opinion for what this property is worth, fair market value wise, on the open market.
Okay, great. All right, any other questions or comments? All right, so now let's go to FY 2023-05. This is Emery Grover, liaisons being Messrs. Dermody and Barnes. We'll go first to the liaisons. And ask if they have any further updates on Emery Grover, and then we'll turn it over to the committee for any discussion or questions we may have.
I have been in contact with the superintendent. He had nothing new to add to what he had presented to us a couple weeks ago. So other than that, no, we're still, we stand pat.
All right, Dermody, questions or comments?
I concur with my colleague, Mr. Barnes, on that statement.
All right, now I'm just going to go, we'll do the kind of quick fire on this. So anyone who has questions or comments? None. Okay. Okay. I have a general question that jumped out at me based after the presentation, or after thinking about the presentation, which is that the Emery Grover project is different, if you will, than our town hall project, in the sense it sounds to me like the project is it's a complete gut. We haven't had the benefit of the full design plans, but a complete gut of the interior. And at some point, I guess maybe I'll put this in a written question form, which is, I'm wondering if we can actually look at what the cost of the restoration, preservation of the kind of, I don't know, we'll call it the shell plus, as opposed to the entire building and all its ancillary parts, which ends up being, 88 or 90%, which ends up apparently being subject to CPC funding to the tune of about 90%. But I don't know if any other committee members had that query or not. But that's kind of, I think that's a way in my mind to distinguish it a little bit from the town hall project, which we ended up funding basically 80% of through CPC funds. And it may be a distinguishing factor between town hall project and our funding commitment and Emery Grover. It's a different project, if you will, based on what it is that we're actually building and constructing. It's a question, kind of a thought that I had. I don't know if anyone else had that thought, and if that's, we don't need to talk about it tonight. I could put it in a written form and we could noodle that through. And Bob kind of touched on that at the evening of the presentation. Bob.
Yeah, pending your, writing this question up, I'm happy to take that on behalf of, the liaisons and our whole committee. I think that's an important distinction that we may want to offer at town meeting in the presentation, or have it in our back pocket, so to speak, to understand the role of CPC funding and the shell is the correct word there, for a building. So thanks for bringing that up.
Okay, so if you're willing to do that, that would be, great. Okay. All right, well, that's my question on that. And so no other questions or comments?
Could I just ask a question about your comment there, Peter?
Absolutely, Rich.
I'm not, just so I make sure I understand, are you saying there's a possibly significant distinction between a project that is a restoration like Town Hall and a project like Emery Grover, in that with the Town Hall, it to my eyes as a user of Town Hall, it appears that there's a substantial restoration to put it back the way it was. The second floor had been filled with a rabbit warren of temporary offices and so forth, but the original woodwork is there, the same, places you go for taxes or for the town clerk, all, the selectmen's chambers, all of that sort of was brought back to what it was in 1910 when it was built. Is that what you mean by restoration versus Emery Grover? The only thing that's being restored perhaps is the slate roof and the exterior walls, and all the rest of it is something else. Is that the distinction you're making?
Yeah, I'm not certain that that's the case, because I'm not certain about what elements are going to be preserved, and it may be that there are, I'm not certain of that. But yes, I'm saying that when you go to Town Hall, you get to walk on creaky floors and right? Isn't that true? Get to walk on creaky floors.
We could ask for creaky floors in the Emery Grover.
Well, no, but I mean, you get to walk on the creaky floors and walk into the original select board's chambers, and you get to walk upstairs to the original Great Hall, and as restored. And what, for me, I think that I'm trying to look at perhaps some principles that we can lay down for this committee in assessing large requests for historic preservation. And it could be I'm not imposing this. I think that it's a data point that's worth exploring, which is there a distinction here between this building and that building? That's all. And this project and that project. Rather than, I know that we have financial constraints that are going to be largely dictating what kind of commitment we make to Emery Grover. But there could be some other factors too that we may want to consider. I just want to get that, if Bob can easily access that to us, and if it's some factor that we want to consider. One of the things that we tried to noodle through in Emery Grover 1 was what was the delta between building a new building and restoring the old building. And perhaps we were noodling this through. Perhaps the principle would be, well, we'll pay for the difference. We'll pay for, we want to preserve things. It's going to cost us more money, but we'll pay for the difference. We'll pay for the difference plus. Maybe that's a principle that we should be looking at. And so I thought I'm kind of intellectually curious about this, and it may lead to some principle that we can live with and work with on a going forward basis. That's really the reason why I'm asking that question. And yeah, Reg, to your point, that's kind of the distinction that I'm looking at.
I think that's a good question, because that sort of thing maybe something that winds up in our 2022 update to the CPA plan to make that kind of distinction. If we can noodle it through, as you put it, in very plain terms here.
Okay. All right. So Artie, you have your hand up, and Bob has his hand up second. So Artie first, and then Bob.
Sorry, I think this stays within.
I thought about letting you stay on mute, by the way. I did.
I would have found out. I would have noticed.
Oh, no, you wouldn't have.
I would have heard the
You would've
blank,
gone
I
like
would've seen
this.
the blank faces.
Oh, no, we were all in on it.
I think this stays within the four corners, and that is it's basically just related to energy. I'll throw it out there: energy efficiency, how that fits into projects that we're funding, and what part do we play in just advocating for that. I'll just throw it out there like that. Where it fits in the future, I don't know, but I can see that as a potential, at least, point to make.
Okay. And Bob, good point. Bob Dermody actually has a really nice quip about that in terms of preservation versus new buildings. I'll let him, I don't want to, right? Bob, what's your comment?
The most sustainable building is the one that's already built.
I love that comment.
That's not mine. I stole it from somebody. All the great ones do, right? But the thing about I just want to throw a little caution on comparing Town Hall and Emery Grover and anything else that's historic preservation, because one of the unique facets in that world, every project is different. I appreciate the sensibility of it. And I've said this before, I'm still trying to understand how architects come before us and give us this very detailed percentage down to the 100th percentile of what counts for CPC funding and what doesn't. And we always just sit there and say, okay, great. I just want to, with the committee's blessing, go meet with this design team and have them explain it to me so that maybe somebody can explain it at town meeting, because I think it's a fair question and it's important to the project.
And it's
so
an
that's
important part of our due diligence too. It really is.
Right.
So yeah,
Right.
that's great.
And so and before we get down the path of modifying our CPA Act or whatever, I think we need to just take this all with a grain of salt. That's it.
Okay.
Ooh, sorry. Yep.
All right. So those are my comments on, and anything to add on FY 2023-05. All right. We're going to move on now to FY 2023-07, and that is the tennis courts. Again, Dermody and Barnes are the liaisons. Any further updates for us?
Not currently. I will probably, given the timing now that we've had another meeting, reach back out to Stacy to see, if there's any new information. I believe we posed some questions to them in their presentation. I think one was about the fencing. And I think we're all really dying to find out does she have any, while talking to the consultants, have any other indication if this project is kind of leaning towards a full rebuild or somewhere less than that? So I'll put a call into Stacy.
Okay. All right, so that concludes our discussion on other applications. And now we're on to schedule for future meetings. So if you look at your agenda, Jean, hand is up.
We didn't talk about all applications. Maybe we only are talking about the ones that have had a certain level of review. I just had a question, if I may, about number, where is it? The final one, the $1 million for open space.
Okay.
Yeah.
All right, so
Yeah, and maybe I should just give you a call because I need some mentoring as a new member about how that works when we ask for a certain amount of money, but we don't have a particular project in mind, and what happens between now and town meeting. And we got this marvelous report today from the finance department. What about all this other money that can be used for open space? Can we boost the million? And I'm thinking of the Fowler property.
all right.
When can we talk about that?
We can talk about that when we have we go into, we have a couple of meetings where we talk about finances. Okay. So this information that came out to you today is preliminary. This is kind of an assessment of what the cash is that's on hand. And the next thing you do is apply it to our plan and apply it to the expenses and the reserve accounts. And what we'll have Dave Davison in perhaps is on February 23rd. I think that may be the date. And, or at least we're going to have a meeting. We're going to be conferring on finances probably on the 23rd, which is our next meeting. And that's when we can talk about that issue. Now,
Okay.
I thought that I covered all active applications other than the placeholder on open space. And what I'll say about placeholder on open space is there was a series of proposals or meetings that were scheduled and canceled, inviting the chairs to executive sessions about discussions that were being held with the trustees of a property on South Street. And that was, the last meeting was adjourned or canceled. And with a note from our town manager that she would be in touch with any, with a revised scheduled date, but I haven't gotten any update on that. Okay. So that placeholder continues. And eventually, if there's no acquisition that happens, then it gets withdrawn. That's basically it. And we can discuss, and as far as the reserve accounts and money in the reserve accounts, we'll discuss that during our finance meetings. That's not on the agenda. It's not on the agenda for this evening. Okay, so we want to stay within our agenda pursuant to the open meeting law. Okay, so now we have a hand up by Laura. And Jean, does that answer your question?
Real quick question. Is this being a placeholder? Can it be increased?
Yes.
That's all I want to know. Thank you.
Okay, Laura.
I just had a quick question on Walker Pond, because it's still showing on the website as under review. Is that, forgive me if I've forgotten, but is that not under our purview at this point, or are we still talking about that?
All right, so that's a question for our staff. Cecilia,
It
status.
hasn't been formally pulled yet. The intent is to come before CPC at the 23rd meeting.
Okay, great. Thank you so much.
What, you mean Walker Pond's going to come before us on the 23rd?
As of right now, yeah.
Okay. All right, because we haven't done any due diligence on this.
Yeah, I'm curious about what they're gonna
Well,
say, because we haven't asked any questions.
I did receive questions from the committee and they were sent out to myself,
Okay.
the proponents.
All right, so now is it on? So now it's potentially on.
It just hasn't been pulled. There's still the intent we're applying for ARPA funds for it, but it's not being pulled until we have a clearer indication of if it will be approved.
When
Right.
we have any sense about when we're going to hear that?
I will ask again. I don't have a sense right now though.
Okay.
Mr. Chair?
Yes. Rick.
Yeah, I'm just concerned because we haven't had any discussions at all. Neither Laura nor I have had any discussions with the acting town engineer about the project. And we had a
Good
whole
point.
series of questions. And, short of re-asking those questions when they appear on the 23rd, I'm not sure the value of having them come in.
Right. I mean, I recall that we were waiting on the status of the ARPA funding because that was important. I remember that. But then I do recall us asking, and there was that, period where we were in between with, the loss of the town engineer and the person replacing him. But you're right, Rick. I don't know where we left that. If we were supposed to reach out to that person or he was going to reach out to us, I'm not really sure.
Now, my understanding was we were on hold, as you said, until the opera was done. I just can't see any value in having that project presented next week, next meeting.
I should
Well,
be able to get an update about the status of the ARPA request tomorrow, and I can email both you, Rick, and Laura with that.
Okay.
If we still don't have an answer at some point, first of all, we could be getting ARPA funding, and I'd rather not waste our time and energy to go through the due diligence process and to later find out that we are getting funded through ARPA. So I don't know if I'm being out of order. I'll let the chair rule on that. Should we consider
Yeah.
tabling the request or requesting that the proponents continue their request till the next funding season? If they're optimistic about ARPA funding, it's going to save us time and energy. So I'll put that. And I don't want to put you in the hot seat, Cecilia, but let's say, does the committee feel like that's a kind of I'm trying to be practical here. We have, we're right in the chute here. We got stuff we still have a lot of work to do. We're going to get it done, but I'm looking at our schedule. And we need to devote some time to the financial issues. We've got our public hearing, we have our select board consultation, we have our FinCom consultation, and we have our voting meeting. And so let's just say, let's think about that. We don't need to make a decision on that tonight, but let's at least think about that prior to our 2/23 meeting as to whether or not Walker Pond should be continued for another funding season.
And Mr. Chair, when is
maybe based on some sort of initial feedback that we're going to get from ARPA as to whether or not it's going to come through. Artie, are you going to save me here?
Yes, I can. I was just going to say, I would think that our liaisons to that project would have the major voice on their comfortability feeling this.
Okay.
Period. That's what.
Okay, good. All right, that's good. That's right. Great. That's excellent. That's a good point. Laura, and why don't we see what Laura and Rick have to say about that? Sorry,
Mr. Chair, I'm just looking at the schedule. I don't see any notation of when our public hearing is. Do we have a date for that?
I had a date. We had a tentative date of 3/9.
3/9.
I had received an email from the finance committee. We had initially discussed doing our finance committee consultation on March 16th or 23rd, and they are requesting the 2nd or the 9th.
March 2nd?
Or the 9th is what they had requested in their email.
Okay. So, all right. So that's 3/9. So that means that's fine. We need to be ready for them. So I think if they want to hear from us on the 9th, they're going to hear from us on the 9th, and we're going to do our best to be ready. Okay.
Mr. Chair, if we're going to be meeting with the finance committee the same night we're having a public hearing?
No.
Oh, okay.
No, I'm looking at no, we're not doing that. Because then we could have our public hearing on 3/16. We could have our vote on 3/23.
Okay.
So here's the schedule then. 2/23. What in my ideal world, I'd like 2/23. I'd like Dave Davison to come in and have a complete financial summary for us ahead of time. Okay. And we'll put Walker Pond ? There. Does that make sense to you, Ricks and Bone?
Honestly, no. I'm not. Have you had discussions? Would Dave Davison be available on the 23rd to do that?
No.
I didn't think so either. And if we have a discussion on the financial discussion, it would be on the information that I sent you today. And Dave, I wouldn't think he would be available until probably after the meeting with the finance committee.
Okay, so here's what we can do. We've done this before, but we had the benefit of Dave's documents. But we can do our own little tutorial on the 23rd using our internal documents that are a pretty good guesstimate of what the finances look like. Those were prepared by Rick Zimbone. And so we can educate ourselves on the 23rd. And so we could be able to talk about financial issues cogently on the 9th with the select, with the FinCom. How does that sound
Right.
to you, Rick Simbo?
Yeah, that sounds good. And in which case, I would just as soon have, and this is just me speaking, not for Laura, but I would just as soon have Walker Pond disappear.
Well,
I know it's
You mean the
physically
actual-
impossible, but.
You
at
mean
least
the actual pond,
funding.
Rick? The whole pond go away?
Well, the pond might be tough, but at least the funding.
you know, I lived in a neighborhood in New Jersey where they had actually filled in the pond. At any rate, and put homes in. But so I don't think we're going to do that.
This is, Peter, this is a public meeting, I hope you know.
I know that. So,
Can I just give my 2 cents for one second, Mr. Chair? It's a little, without knowing whether there's other funding and without having the benefit of talking to the assistant or town engineer, whatever case may be, it really, we really don't have, I wouldn't be prepared at all to support this at this time. There's a lot missing, right? Rick?
Yeah, Laura, you said a lot more politely than I just did before you, so that's fine.
Okay, so you don't really want, okay, so, but your idea is not that it disappears, but that our position is perhaps we should, in light of the fact that ARPA funding is a possibility, and the amount of work that we have on our docket, we would request that they pursue ARPA funding, and if failing that they come before us in the next funding cycle. So that's the question that I have. I think we want to pose that to our staff and see what kind of feedback we get, right? That's kind of what the committee is saying, right? Committee feel that way? I don't even know if we need a resolution on that. Yes, Jean.
Just clarification, you're saying if failing that is, they don't get ARPA funding, they should look to another funding cycle? Isn't that the opposite of what we're saying?
Oh, if that effort fails, then they could come back to us. If getting ARPA funding fails, then they can come back to us in the next funding cycle for funding from CPC.
Oh, I thought we were going to get an answer on whether they're likely to get ARPA funds tomorrow or something. Isn't that what Cecilia said?
I don't think we're going to get an answer. I think we're going to get I think we're going to get an update, but maybe we will get an answer. I guess it's possible.
Right, I mean, that would change things for sure if we knew about that. So we
Okay.
should allow for that to happen if it can happen.
Okay, let's do
I
it.
just want to understand you. That's
No, it's a good, no, it's getting a little late, Jean, and you're really helpful. That's good. Sorry.
Yeah, Mr. Chair, I just, on a personal note, I don't know how to put this. I'm concerned about my level of burden on being the liaison for, and I'm not sure where Laura fits on this, but being liaison for the Needham Housing Authority projects and this one with a very short time frame, plus doing the financials. I don't have a career dedicated to the CPC.
Okay. All right, so why don't we make, well, we do have, all right, so do we have any committee members? All right, let's just put this out on the table, but I think we'll get some clarity tomorrow. Let's just say we need to know one way or the other right now. And we need to talk about reassigning this, or because Rick is carrying a big load.
What about me?
What's that? And
What about me?
and Laura too. You didn't complain.
Oh, right.
You got
He's too polite.
No, I'm not.
You want it?
No, but it's true. I mean, I've got the historical commission, I've got the housing working group. There's a lot right now. And this is our big time, right? So we want to give it the attention it deserves.
Okay. Well, let me ask for volunteers. Anyone who, if the proposal goes forward, well, we have two options here. We can say, I can ask for volunteers to act as liaison. Anyone, if you, or is that Chris Gersel has his hand up to be a volunteer?
I will help out. I know that I'm part of the Park and Rec and that is part of the proponents, but anything I can do to help out this application, I will do that. I mean, it is an active application. I know it's a tight frame that I don't think we should be deciding right now if we're going to pull it from the table or not. I think we need to give it a certain timeline to say, listen, we got to hear it by this date. If not, we're going to have to go down this route just because it's a short time. But we got to give it a few more days and at least see what that timeline's like.
And I'll stay on this. I don't want to drop off this.
Okay, you want to drop off? How about this? I'm looking at Jean McKnight.
I know you are.
I thought you raised your hand. Didn't you raise your hand?
Well, I more or less said, oh, no.
Oh, is that what it was?
Because I could see this coming. No, I realized that I had a project, was a cricket field, and that was taken off the table. So now I don't have a project. So I guess I owe it to the committee to say I'll work on it. I'm just concerned about, as Laura is, that I'm also the co-chair of the Housing Plan Working Group. That's my only concern. But if Chris would help and Laura stay involved, I'll join in too. Yeah.
Yeah, I mean,
the more the merrier.
All right, good.
Yeah.
So now let's just, all right, so the message from the committee is we would really urge, we really need to know. And if there is a likelihood of ARPA funding, then let's not dangle it along here and let's.
Right.
Okay.
Can I add, sorry, I didn't realize my video is off here.
Go ahead, Reg.
I had my hand up here, there. Well, what's going on here? There we go. I just want to build on Chris's comment here. I think we have to look at a couple of chess moves ahead. It's not just the 23rd, but all these projects have a follow-on with more questions and more things that need to be researched and so forth and so on. There's no reason to think that this one is going to be any different, I think, and personally, I really think it would be appropriate, just as a matter of routine, but especially with respect to this project, that if the proponents of this project still want to have us consider it at this sort of late hour, that they do everything that needs to be done and have it done by no later than Thursday of next week, with the help of the advocates signing up for that, Jean signing up for that, so that Cecilia can send it out on like Friday, if a 75-page thing to digest, not the day before, that sort of thing. It just seems to me, there's a sort of hurry up offense that goes beyond just getting the initial answers to all the questions and everything, similar to what we've spent all evening going through tonight.
I have to admit, I didn't realize that this workload would come immediately like a tidal wave next week. I am going to be away. I'm going to be in Puerto Rico next week. I can't work on this until I get back. So if that affects things, I should have mentioned that.
Well, I mean, all right, that's good. But remember, perhaps we as a committee are assuming a little too much responsibility here. These questions have to go out. We have to, and it's up to the proponents to put together coherent packages and put it together expeditiously, so that we have an opportunity to review it. So I anticipate that there's going to be any drafting of additional questions, but there's going to be.
I know from the proponent standpoint, they have received the questions. Their intent was they weren't ready for the meeting tonight. They requested that we push back to the 23rd, and their intent was to have answers to your questions to you before that date.
Yeah, we need, okay, so, but we don't, I guess what Reg is saying, and I think it's fair, is we need him before, we don't need it, we can't, it's not really fair to us to get him on the 21st.
Mr. Chair, I'd suggest that we need to put a definitive date as to whether the proponents are going to be funded through an ARPA grant, or that they postpone it till next cycle. there's got to be a date. We can't continue to wait. And I don't know what the process is to get approval for the grant. But, at some point, we have to carry on with our CPC lives here.
Yeah, I mean, I'm thinking of a date of either Friday or Monday. And the answer, and they should, to provide us with an answer of either yes or maybe. And if it's either yes or maybe, then the application should be pulled. If it's no, then they can go forward. But we need an answer either my proposal would be either by Friday or Monday.
I can get
I
that
think
for
that's
you.
fair to us. We got to be fair to the process, right? We
Mhm.
want to honor right? You got to be fair to us. Right? And in fact, Friday. Because volunteers do volunteer work on weekends. So Friday's a day. Okay.
Thank you.
Chair's prerogative. Okay. So now let's finish up. Let's wrap it up here on our future meetings. 2/23, we're going to be we're going to have our financial education session run by Rick Zumba. 3/9, strike that. 3/8 is 3/8 our select board consultation.
Yes.
Okay. 3/9 FinCom.
Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah.
Okay. Then we have 3/16 is our public hearing. 3/23 is our vote. We get to take April off.
Mr. Chair,
Yes.
may not be available for public hearing. My apologies.
On what day? On 3/16?
Yes.
All right, let me check with everyone else. Public hearing date, 3/16. Ooh, I'm not available.
Good thing you asked yourself.
Hold on for a minute. Just
Sorry,
hold on.
it's this late.
We'll just do it without you, Pete. Don't worry. We'll do it.
Wow, hold on.
Wait, who's the vice chair?
Artie,
There we go.
when's the election? Is it after the 16th?
No, it's April 12th. It's
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
So I may, I might, yeah, you know what? I can delay that. All right. Just bear with me.
We're bearing.
Cecilia, while Pete
Okay,
is there,
so-
do you know when the warrant is finalized and goes out?
Yes, it is in my notes. Hold on one second.
Okay, so
The warrant is going to the printer on April 1st and the finance committee votes on March 30th.
Okay. Thank you.
Are we gonna go by Zoom on 3/16? We'll have our public hearing on 3/16 by Zoom, right? Okay, so I might be out of town, but I anticipate being out of town on 3/17. I think we'll be okay. It's just, I'll work around that schedule, okay?
Okay.
Okay, so 3/17. Great. I'm glad we did this. All right. All right, that's our schedule. Do we have any minutes?
Oh,
Minutes tonight?
may I confirm our next meeting? Is it 2 weeks from tonight?
2/23.
Okay, just want to confirm. Thank you.
I'll repeat them again, but I thought.
That's,
No, it's
No, we're
okay.
good.
No, we're
You
good.
got it?
We're
Okay,
good.
good. All right.
We're good. We're good.
All right.
I
good.
can
All right.
send out in addition to my what I find out about Walker Pond, the future meeting dates as well in an email, so everyone's on the same page.
Thank you.
On,
thanks.
just on that subject again of water, if we do in fact do Walker Pond on the 23rd, don't we need another CPC meeting that, you know, the following week or two before we roll into the public hearing and all those select board and FinCom meetings?
I don't, not necessarily. In a perfect world, we should, but not necessarily.
So
I
we'll
have
assume we're
on my
one and
calendar ready for
done.
the 9th.
So, all right, I just want to, what I like to do, what we've done in the past is we have a meeting. I mean, you raise a good point, Rich, which is this. Going into the select board and FinCom on 3.8 and 3.9. So here's what we would do at our next agenda. So on 223, we'd go through the finances and we review the projects. And then I get a sense of the committee. And then I put together a memo. That's basically my presentation, slightly different for each of the board, but presentation for the select board and the presentation for FinCom, which is, you know, a rundown of the project, a sense of, we haven't voted, a sense of the committee, and then take questions. I'm not bound to do the sense of the committee. I've done it in the past because of the particulars of the season and some of the requests. I don't necessarily have to do that, but I do need to get a sense from this committee about where we're going on 223 with respect to the pending project. So you raise a really good point, Rich. We may be we may not have great information on Walker Pond for me going into the select board and the FinCom consultations.
Mr. Chair, you always have the March 2nd date as a contingency date if you had to.
Oh.
That's
That's
really what I'm
great.
trying to raise. Yeah, I think things are not going to go perfectly. They never do. And if they do go perfectly, we can cancel the March 2nd meeting if that's the
Oh,
right
yeah,
date.
that's perfect. All right, I lost that. So that's good, Reg. Okay. All right. So 3 seconds. So our next two meetings are 223 and 3.2. Okay.
Just so you know, I will be on a flight on 3/2 at that time period, so Kristen will be running the Zoom.
Okay.
All right.
All right. And so I had a tentative, so I may, on 3/16, I was actually thought I was going to be on a flight on 3/16. I may be able to delay it until 3/17. Okay. All right.
Would you like me to see if Dave Davison is available on the 23rd?
The 23rd or the 2nd.
Okay.
Those are the two preferable dates.
Will do.
Well, the 23rd, he's not going to have the information, Peter.
Yeah, so the 2nd. That's great. We'll be on pretty good footing if we meet again on the 2nd. Okay. And I'm sorry for the length of the meeting. Okay.
And Peter, the 23rd will be the financial primer. How's that?
It's called a teach-in.
I don't know about that, but it'll be the basic discussion point, starting point.
Financial 101.
Okay. You know, come on, it's a teach-in. You're teaching, this committee's teaching itself. Come on. All right, great. All right, again, I apologize for the length of the meeting and thank you all. So now we have no other issues.
No meeting minutes this meeting, sorry.
No meeting minutes, and now I'd like to entertain a motion to adjourn.
So moved.
Second.
Okay, so we will roll call. We'll do the roll call vote, and we'll do it in alphabetical order. Barnes.
Aye.
Crocker.
Aye.
Dermody.
Yes.
Dorfman.
Yes.
Foster.
Yes.
Gersel.
Yes.
McKnight.
Aye.
Zimbo.
Aye.
And then the chair votes aye.
Thank you, Cecilia
Thank
and
you very
Kristen,
much.
as always.
Thank you.
Yes,
Thank you.
thank you
Thanks,
all.
everybody.
Thank you.
Thanks,
Good night.
everybody. Good night.
Good night.
Go Bengals.